Chapter 21:17. Old Bone Demon. Xiaogu was in high spirits. He was always happy to find a new target to imitate. The azure-robed man's eyes shone with a shocking light. He scanned Xiaogu's body a few times and couldn't help but sigh sadly. So you've also perished. Xiaogu also sighed. In fact, this was very true. The eternal celestial king had indeed died several epochs ago. But Ling Han and the others all knew that Xiaogu was imitating, which made them feel strangely amused. One was a sliver of wool left on the celestial tool, and the other was a bone. They were sighing at each other, which made people feel strange. The azure-robed man made a gesture of making fingers, and closed his eyes slightly. After a while he said, "So many years have passed." A dead person saying that he had been dead for many years. This was getting stranger and stranger. "Senior, since you've already perished for many years, why don't you give this bell to me?" Ling Han asked. When these words were spoken, Lu Herong was instantly scared out of her wits. He was a ninth heaven celestial king, and even if he had been dead for innumerable years, he was still alive, and would definitely be respectful to him. You actually dared to ask him for a celestial tool? You were really bold, and your skin was also really thick. The azure-robed man faltered, and then laughed loudly. I've been dead for innumerable years, and this remnant of my soul is still lingering on the bell of time. Now that I've awakened, I'll disappear in a dozen or so days at most. Alright, I'll give you the bell of time. Fuck, he really gave it to her. Lu Herong couldn't help but sigh inwardly. She should have asked first. Although the bell of time was damaged, it was still a celestial tool forged by a ninth heaven celestial king, and it still had the might of a seventh or eighth heaven celestial tool. The azure-robed man seemed to know what Lu Herong was thinking, and said calmly, "Little girl, you're not lucky enough, so don't feel pity." Lu Herong couldn't help but be shocked. She was a fourth heaven celestial king, and could not show her emotions, but under the gaze of the azure-robed man, she had no place to hide. His eyes were too sharp. This little girl." The azure-robed man looked at Hunyeo, and revealed an expression of realization. "You are Brother Rock's seventh disciple, right? However, your divine sense is incomplete, and you are neither human nor object. You are no longer the person you once were." As expected of a ninth heaven immortal king, nothing could be hidden from his eyes. Even if he's just a soul fragment right now. "Senior, you sacrificed yourself in order to resist the forces of darkness. But now these people from the forces of darkness are trying to extract the source power of heaven and earth of this realm in vain, destroying the defenses of our realm. Please act, Senior." Ling Han clasped his hands in salute. He didn't know what level that Black Dragon King was. If it was higher than the fourth celestial layer, then LV Herong would just be sending herself to die. The azure-robed man was the discarnate soul of the eternal immortal king, so he could be considered an eternal immortal king. He suddenly revealed an angry expression. These monsters from the outer realms still haven't given up. Boom! Divine light gushed out of his body, illuminating the entire void. "Farewell, Senior." LV Herong bowed. This battle would be the true final battle of the eternal immortal king. There were rules of heaven and earth. When a person dies, their Tao disappears. This remnant soul had relied on a celestial artifact to survive for several epochs, but once it unleashed its might, it would be completely incinerated and completely perish. "Farewell, Senior." Ling Han and the others also bowed respectfully. The celestial kings who had died in battle here were all worthy of praise and tears. They had died in battle for the celestial realm, and were worthy of being remembered by the younger generation forever. "Farewell, Senior." Xiaogu also followed suit. The eternal immortal king couldn't help but be speechless. He and Xiaogu had been equally famous when they had been alive, and in terms of reaching Tao earlier, Xiaogu was even older than him. Yet Xiaogu actually called him Senior. This naturally left him feeling very helpless. However, he wasn't in the mood to reminisce with Xiaogu. His final glory had already begun to burn. Xiao, a figure shot over, bringing with her endless darkness. This was a woman about 30 years old. She had a voluptuous figure, and her skin seemed to be glowing, glistening and lustrous. Her long hair was tied up in a bun on top of her head, and her eyes swept over them with an extremely sharp gaze. "So it's just a few bedbugs. she said with a scoff. A black dragon soared into the air behind her, its 4 claws waving as it exuded a terrifying dragon's might. Was this the Black Dragon King? There was no dazzling light swirling around her, and it was completely impossible to tell her cultivation level. Wuxia, the eternal immortal king, revealed an expression of shock. You actually didn't die. Furthermore, you've fallen into darkness. Wuxia, Ling Han, and the others all felt their hearts tremble. The first dragon in this world was known as the Source Dragon, or the Ancestral Dragon. The Ancestral Dragon had 9 sons, and the 7th son was Wuxia. Who would have thought that Wuxia was actually a woman? The Black Dragon King roared with laughter. It was not arrogant but rather insane. She glowered at the eternal immortal king and said, "When I was captured by Lord Mo, did any of you come to save me? To say nothing of you. Even my father abandoned me like a cloak covering his shoes. In that case, why should I still risk my life for this world? I want to destroy this world with my own hands." The eternal immortal king was extremely decisive, and he immediately charged forward. In that case, there's nothing more to say. He didn't say anything about pulling her back to the light, or anything of the sort. Firstly, she was too stubborn, and it was impossible to persuade her. Secondly, he didn't have that kind of time. Pung! The Black Dragon King punched out, transforming into a gigantic dragon claw that swiped at the eternal immortal king. A black lotus bloomed on the dragon's head behind her, exuding a demonic aura. 16 lotuses. Ling Han knew that the 9 lotuses of the dark forces corresponded to the ascending origin tier. So what did 16 lotuses mean? Pung! The eternal immortal king and the Black Dragon King clashed head-on. Both of them shuddered at the same time, and they were forced back 10,000 miles. However, they only took a single step forward, and then they charged back, continuing to exchange blows. Pung pung pung. Explosions rang out like rain, and shockingly, the Black Dragon King didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. If you were still in your strongest state, I would indeed be no match for you, the Black Dragon King said proudly. However, you are only a remnant soul now, and can only wield the power of an 8th heaven celestial king. Although I am a 7th heaven celestial king, I have the mighty power bestowed upon me by Lord Mo, and am no weaker than you. My physique is intact, and my spirit is intact, so I can fight on endlessly. As for you, you are only a flickering candle in the wind, and can be extinguished at any moment. The eternal immortal king didn't answer, and continued to attack with all his might. With a loud shout, a translucent blade appeared in his hands, and the power of time swirled around it. This was the regulations of time that he had condensed, and if struck by it, his body would be torn apart by the power of time. Some would be thrown back 700 years, some would be thrown back 100,000 years, and some would be thrown back 3 epochs. The eternal immortal king was right. He didn't have much time, but the Black Dragon King could live forever, so this wasn't a fair battle at all. Meanwhile, Ling Han's heart was pounding. He hadn't imagined that the dark forces would actually take this place so seriously and send out an elite with 16 lotuses. His cultivation level was comparable to a 7th heaven celestial king, and his battle prowess was close to that of an 8th heaven celestial king. It was said that there were 9 heavens for celestial kings, and each step was a step towards the heavens. However, the Black Dragon King had received some power from Lord Mo, and could actually leap over a heaven? Was the power of darkness really so terrifying? Moreover, it would also make many people's hearts beat faster, and cause them to fall into darkness, right? Chapter 21:18. Yaya. Xiaogu faltered, and then suddenly revealed a ferocious look, killing intent boiling. The power of darkness, his great enemy. Boom! The celestial king bone in his body circulated with endless light, and characters pulsed, soaring into the sky. They even forcibly tore a hole in the void storm above the continent, and stopped swirling. Die! Xiaogu's face was filled with fury as he charged towards the Black Dragon King. Ha! The Black Dragon King showed a look of surprise. She had not taken Ling Han's group seriously at first, and the only one who could be considered a great enemy, by her, was the eternal celestial king. But now that Xiaogu was displaying his might, He actually exuded an aura that she could not afford to underestimate. Haha, old bone demon. Are you finally going to show your might? The eternal celestial king laughed loudly. Yaya. Xiaogu was no longer interested in repeating the eternal celestial king's words. He reached into his body and pulled out that celestial king bone, and then whipped it at the black dragon king. Old bone demon. The black dragon king frowned, and then came to a realization. You are the bone demon celestial king? She showed a look of wariness. The bone demon celestial king was equally famous as the eternal celestial king, but he had attained Tao earlier. Legend had it that he had become a celestial king through a single bone that had gained sentience. Thus, though Xiaogu was a fool now, as long as that celestial king bone was present, no one could underestimate him. Boom! This celestial king bone circulated with brilliant light, and characters lit up one after another. They were all ninth heaven level true interpretations of great Tao, and any one of them could crush the sky. If this was not a battle in the void, perhaps the sky would have already been shattered. And this was also a place where a celestial venerable had refined a precious tool. So it had been refined to become incredibly sturdy. Even a battle like this between Xiaogu, the Black Dragon King, and the Eternal Celestial King would only cause rocks to shatter and cliffs to fall. Otherwise, a casual strike from a Celestial King could completely destroy this valley, turning it into a sea, or even nothingness. The Black Dragon King laughed loudly. Then let me meet the two ninth heaven masters who were once so famous that they were equal to my father. A 16-petaled black lotus bloomed between her brows. Her entire body spewed out a dark aura that was incompatible with this world. Black Dragon Dark Destruction Wave, she roared softly. As she punched out, a black light surged forth, transforming into the head of a black dragon that lunged at Xiaogu and the Eternal Celestial King. When the dragon's head was about to bite down, it opened its mouth and spat out a black lotus. Instantly, a boundless destructive aura spread out, as if the entire world was about to be destroyed. The Eternal Celestial King and Xiaogu both fought back with all their might. Pung pung pung. They unleashed their celestial techniques to resist this black lotus. What was even more terrifying was that this black lotus was like a piece of the sky, and was completely indestructible and unstoppable. It actually pressed down on the Eternal Celestial King, and Xiaogu bit by bit. Ha 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 ha, what ninth stage immortal king? You can't even withstand a single blow from the power of darkness. The Black Dragon King laughed loudly. She pointed at the lotus with both hands, providing energy to it. Bell of time come! The Eternal Celestial King shouted. Wang! The bronze bell in the valley immediately responded, and with a whoosh, it soared into the air and flew towards the Eternal Celestial King. Time is like a song, he said softly before pointing at the clock of time. Dong! The sound of the bell reverberated through the air. Dang dang dang! Countless bell sounds reverberated through the air, some from the past, and some from the future. The Eternal Celestial King was a celestial king who had mastered the regulations of time, and had also cultivated the regulations of time to a supreme level. He could change the past and influence the future. Wang! A passageway opened up in the air, and a man in azure robes was flying out from within. Another Eternal Celestial King. This was an Eternal Celestial King from another space-time. An Eternal Celestial King who had not yet died 8 epochs ago. However, the current Eternal Celestial King had used the Bell of Time as a medium to forcibly pull himself out from the past. This was a past body, and would not exist for long. However, this was a true 9th stage Celestial King, and if he unleashed his full power, he would be able to kill an 8th stage Celestial King in less than a few moves. Time is like a song. Could it be that this celestial technique had been passed down from the Eternal Celestial King? The Black Dragon King's expression instantly changed. She definitely could not allow this past body to reach this stage. Otherwise, only death awaited her. She roared loudly, and dragon scales instantly surfaced all over her body. Her entire person had transformed into a dragon, and she angrily waved her claw, sweeping it toward the space-time passageway. Pung! A terrifying power swept past, and the space-time passageway was instantly destroyed. The Eternal Celestial King couldn't help but frown. His current power was too weak, while his past body was too strong. As a result, it was incredibly difficult for his past body to arrive, and it was also incredibly slow. Furthermore, the Black Dragon King's attack had directly destroyed the space-time passageway. The Black Dragon King laughed madly and said, "Do you have any more tricks up your sleeves?" The two ninth-stage celestial kings of the past could only struggle bitterly in front of her, and this made her feel incredibly smug. So what if they had been high and mighty in the past? Now they could only be trampled by her. "I'll send you on your way." The Black Dragon King's dragon body soared into the air, and a 16-petal black lotus appeared beneath her feet. The power of destruction surged, and she seemed invincible. Yaya! Xiao Gu was infuriated, but his power was only at the 8th stage, and perhaps even slightly weaker. Naturally, he could not suppress the Black Dragon King. Meanwhile, the Eternal Celestial King was like a faded flower, and his remnant soul could be extinguished at any moment. Defeat was already decided. Retreat! Lu Herong made a prompt decision. If they waited for the Black Dragon King to free himself, they would all die. How could they stand against a 7th-stage Celestial King? What more when the Black Dragon King had the battle prowess of an 8th-stage Celestial King? "You guys leave first." Ling Han only thought for a moment, and then immediately made up his mind. He could not let go of those source powers of heaven and earth. Firstly, they could make him stronger, and secondly, if they fell into the hands of the dark forces, they would be one step closer to a large-scale invasion by the dark forces. He had to give it a try, and put his all on the line, and his confidence came from the Black Tower. "We'll accompany you," the Empress immediately said. "No, you guys can only leave, and then I can put my all on the line," Ling Han said. If the Black Tower fully unleashed its might would be overwhelming, and he was sure that it would not be difficult to rival the Black Dragon King, or even suppress him. However, it might attract the attention of those old monsters. Thus he had to have no worries at all. The Empress was determined, and immediately nodded. She pulled along the still screaming Hunyao, and leaped towards Lu Herong. Lu Herong did not dissuade her. Since she was the heir of that lord, it was naturally necessary for her to have this kind of courage. Furthermore, perhaps she also had the ability to pull millet out of the fire. "Let's go." With a wave of her slender hand, she picked up all the women, and immediately fled into the distance. Little bug. The Black Dragon King saw this, and casually shot out an attack, wanting to kill Lu Herong. However, the Eternal Celestial King moved in time, dispersing this attack. In just a moment, Lu Herong had already shot through the air, and entered the void. In the whirlwind of energy, even a 9th Heaven Celestial King would not be able to find any trace of her. "Small tower, point me to the location of the source powers of heaven and earth." Ling Han's expression was resolute. He definitely had to obtain those source powers of heaven and earth. Even if he could not obtain them, he had to let them go, and definitely could not let them fall into the hands of the Black Dragon King. "Follow my instructions." Small Tower seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, and actually did not bicker with Ling Han. Instead, it began to point him in the right direction. Chapter 2120. With the new source power entering his body, a fight was naturally unavoidable. Thankfully, Ling Han was already used to this kind of fight. He would first let the 5 source powers fight to their heart's content, and then he would mediate between them, acting as a peacemaker. Though the 9 heavens flame and shining source water had been extracted from his body, their source marks were still there, unwilling to move at all. After dealing with the void spirit glazed glass, the next step was the purple flame of heart and soul. This was a bit troublesome, because Ling Han himself could not collect this immortal flame, so he had to convince this source power to go with him. This was really too difficult. "I'll give it a try. Since it's a source power, it should have a considerable intelligence." Ling Han adjusted his direction, and arrived at the Taoist's head. This was a sea of fire, and in the middle of the sea of fire, there was a small dog jumping and playing. The purple flame of heart and soul actually turned into a dog. Had it developed its own intelligence, and possessed a special life? It is only at the initial stage of self-independence, but there is still a long time before it can develop a true life. Small Tower said. That means this small dog only has the intelligence of a 2 or 3-year-old, Ling Han murmured. I can trick it. He stopped near the sea of fire and said, What a cute dog. Come here, let me have a good look. Because he was now only a ball of divine sense, when he spoke, it was through divine sense, and there was no problem in communication. Thus, the small dog immediately walked over to him, tilting its head in a hesitant manner. It's very fun. Ling Han continued to trick it. The small dog took a few steps forward, and then stopped. It looked at Ling Han, a look of hesitation on its face. Come on, come on. If Ling Han's real body was here, he would definitely take out all kinds of food from the Black Tower to entice this small dog. But now, he could only use words to trick it. The small dog took 1 step, then 2 steps, then 2 steps, then 2 steps, then 1 step. After a long time, it finally arrived at the edge of the sea of fire. But when it reached this step, it was still unwilling to take another step. Come on, I still have a large black dog with me. Perhaps you too know it, Ling Han continued. The puppy just looked at him with its head cocked to one side. It did not bark or take another step. Don't be afraid. Come. Ling Han began to retreat. After he had retreated a long distance, the puppy started to become impatient. It kept pacing in place, stopping from time to look at Ling Han, as if it was hesitating whether it should follow him or not. If we don't leave now, we won't have another chance. Ling Han continued to retreat. The puppy finally made up its mind. It suddenly spread its 4 legs and rushed towards Ling Han. Pung! It crashed head-on into Ling Han's body. Instantly, Ling Han's knowledge sea shook, and his divine sense was knocked out of the Taoist's body. A ball of flames also moved, crashing towards Ling Han's body. Of course, Ling Han wouldn't take this source power of heaven and earth. He said in his heart, Small pagoda. Are you sure? Small Tower asked. It knew what Ling Han wanted to do. I'm sure, Ling Han answered without hesitation. A black pagoda suddenly appeared. There was a supreme aura circulating around it, as if it was the sky, and it was the earth. It was unique between heaven and earth. Tower of 3 realms. That ball of flames instantly stopped. Even if it was only a ball of flames, Ling Han could sense a kind of will that it exuded, and it was filled with reverence towards the Black Tower. The Black Tower opened slightly and swallowed this ball of flames. Then it disappeared with a xiao and returned to Ling Han's body. This was an extremely risky move. The Tower of 3 Realms was too powerful, surpassing the level of a 9th heaven celestial king. Once it appeared, it would definitely cause the heaven and earth to tremble, and a heavenly venerable could easily sense this kind of fluctuation. Ling Han dared to do this because there was an endless storm of energy in the void. This could weaken the tremors caused by the Tower of 3 Realms appearing, and there was over a 90% chance that he could deceive a heavenly venerable. If it was under normal circumstances, then unless Small Tower could conceal the aura of the Black Tower, Ling Han definitely wouldn't dare to act so recklessly. But since he had a 90% chance, he was still willing to give it a try. Everything was calm and peaceful. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. If a heavenly venerable really descended, it would probably be useless even if the Black Tower fully unleashed its might. You're wrong, Small Tower said slightly proudly. Though I'm no match for him in a head-on confrontation, protecting you while you escape is not a problem. However, that way, those old geezers will target you, and you can forget about taking another step out of the Black Tower. Otherwise, only death awaits you. Ling Han nodded. Thus, if he could avoid using the Black Tower, he would try not to. Come, let's go find the next source power of heaven and earth. Small Tower continued to guide them, and a day later, they discovered a large rock. Is there a celestial king buried underneath? Ling Han asked. Wrong, this is that celestial king, Small Tower said with a scoff. A rock? This is the Bluestone celestial king, and he obtained Tao from an ordinary rock. Because he sat on it when he was in seclusion, he gained intelligence, and finally cultivated to become a celestial king, Small Tower said. Because he achieved Tao from a stubborn rock, it was very easy for him to obtain the acknowledgement of the source power of earth, and he obtained the Black Tortoise origin soil. Ling Han pressed his hand down and said, Hold on. Who did you say sat on the bluestone celestial king when he was in seclusion? Idiot, you can't say the name because this master is too powerful. Once his name is mentioned, he will sense it. Do you want to die? Small Tower said as if talking to an idiot. One of those 3 celestial venerables? Ling Han knew. Small Tower didn't mock him this time. Ling Han was really curious. Who were these 3 celestial venerables? But if he asked, Small Tower would definitely say that calling out their true names and titles would draw their senses. Perhaps they would appear in front of them with a single thought. At that time, Ling Han could only hide in the Black Tower and flee for his life. Ling Han set aside this curiosity, because there was a more important matter now. In this rock, there was a source power of heaven and earth of earth. That was what he needed the most right now. He sat down cross-legged, circulated the indestructible heaven's scroll, and began to absorb the source power of earth from the rock. The level of the indestructible heaven's scroll was too high. It was created by a heavenly venerable, and had a strong attraction to the source power of heaven and earth. Soon, therefore, the stone began to shine bright, as if it had a life of its own, pulsing with a heartbeat. He didn't have much time left. The battle between the Black Dragon King, the Eternal Celestial King, and Xiao Gu could end at any moment, and the Black Dragon King could also appear at any moment. He could either hide in the Black Tower, or be killed. In any case, he wouldn't have the chance to collect any other source powers of heaven and earth. 3 days later, the whole stone was glowing, and then became transparent. There was a piece of multicolored soil in the middle, that was constantly changing into all kinds of shapes. Path rock suddenly split open, and the 5-colored soil soared into the air, flying towards Ling Han. Pooh! The multicolored soil smashed onto Ling Han's head and then disappeared. Hong! Huge waves immediately surged in Ling Han's dantian. The source energies were fighting again, beginning to fight for territory. Fine, I'll continue to be the peacemaker. Chapter 21-21. Because he had already experienced this many times, Ling Han very easily settled the 6 source powers, allowing them to divide and rule in his dantian. Finally replenishing the 5 source powers, his source Great Collision could erupt with the strongest power. Don't be smug, hurry up, Small Tower urged. Ling Han nodded, and didn't bother to understand the effects of the Black Tortoise Chaos Soil, standing up and walking. A few hours later, he came to the side of a large river. This river was not ordinary, and what surged inside was not water but lightning. Needless to say, the source must be the source of lightning. Ling Han couldn't help but think of the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. At that time, he followed a lightning river to find the place where his spirit resided. He wondered how this guy was now. Had he recovered to the immortal palace tier? Revenge should be very difficult, right? He seemed to have offended an ascending origin tier elite, and no matter how genius the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire was, it would take him millions of years to reach the ascending origin tier, right? He was already a genius among geniuses. Ling Han put away his distracting thoughts. The source of lightning was a source power that he didn't have, and his strength would increase greatly if he obtained it. Has anyone obtained 9 source powers before? He suddenly asked curiously. Yes, Small Tower answered without hesitation. Who? The original master of the Black Tower, Small Tower said, a hint of melancholy in its tone. Ling Han was instantly rendered speechless. The reason he was able to obtain 6 source powers of heaven and earth was actually mostly because he had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, which attracted the source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if he had relied on himself, he might not have been able to obtain even one. With this comparison, the gap between him and that master was very obvious. Don't be discouraged, Small Tower said. The heavenly venerable could obtain 9 source powers, because he severed his own cultivation after cultivating to the 9th heaven, and lived a new life. At that time, he had already hastily created the indestructible heaven scroll. Ling Han was surprised. It turned out that Ji Wuming wasn't the first 9th heaven celestial king to sever his own cultivation. However, with this he felt much better. At least that master couldn't make the 9 source powers take the initiative to get close to him. He strode forward, and soon arrived at the end of the lightning river. There was a lightning pool in front of him that was boiling with blue lightning liquid. Boundless lightning, Lil Tower said. Same old rules? Ling Han asked. Yes. Ling Han started collecting again. With the indestructible heavens scroll, it was actually not difficult to collect the source power of heaven and earth. What was difficult was time, because what Ling Han lacked the most was time. After 9 days, Ling Han finally activated the source energy of heaven and earth and successfully collected it. Previously, it took a lot of effort to collect those 4 heavenly essences. But now, it's like you can pick them up just by lowering your head. AI, this comparison really makes me sad, sighed Ling Han. You're taking advantage of us. And you're still trying to act innocent, Small Tower pointed out. Ling Han chuckled. Who would want to put in so much effort to get something done for no reason? It was just that it was too easy this time, which made him sigh with emotion. Under Small Tower's guidance, he began to search for the 5th source power of heaven and earth. After walking for a short while, Ling Han suddenly stopped. He had found a corpse. Finding corpses here was a very normal thing. This was the primordial battlefield, so it would be strange if there were no deaths. But this corpse was very special, because although it was in human form, the other parts of it looked very strange. It had a pair of ox hooves, and its whole body was pitch black, covered in the same black scales. There was also a pair of wings that were as thin as cicadas on its back. And on its face, a pair of huge eyes took up almost half of its area. Its mouth was pointed like a mosquito's, and it could no longer be called a mouth. It would be more appropriate to describe it as a mouthpiece. Ling Han had seen many races, but if they had taken human form, although they would still retain some of their original race's characteristics, he had definitely never seen one like this. This is a foreign elite, Small Tower suddenly said. Foreign elites looked like this. So ugly, Ling Han commented. 18 Lotus elites. In order to stop him, 4 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings were mobilized. Even so, 1 Ninth Heaven Celestial King still perished, said Small Tower. Just to stop him? Ling Han revealed a serious expression. The difficulty of stopping an expert and killing an expert were 2 completely different things. If 4 experts of the same level had to be mobilized to stop a single person, especially when they were practically supreme existences like Ninth Heaven Immortal Kings, then just how powerful was this person from the other side? Just to stop him, Small Tower said solemnly. Now you can probably understand the severity of this battle. Is this foreign elite especially powerful, or is it that all of them are? All of them. This time, Ling Han was really shocked. To be able to become a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, all of them were definitely top-notch existences. Even if there was a difference, it shouldn't be that big. But any random foreign elite could match 4 from the Celestial region. It was no wonder that the Celestial region could only adopt a defensive stance, and couldn't counterattack, or completely deal with the tide of darkness. Moreover, this is because the foreign elite entered the Celestial region, and was suppressed by our world. Otherwise, they would be even stronger. Small Tower said an even crueler truth. Fortunately, Ling Han nodded. If that was the case, if the Celestial region launched a counterattack, then they would only be completely annihilated. The ancient realm was split into 2, becoming the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld. Was it because of the foreign elite? Ling Han suddenly thought of a question that he hadn't gotten an answer to for a long time. Yes and no. Small Tower's answer was very uncertain. Fuck, yes means yes, no means no. What kind of answer was that? The splitting of the ancient realm is indeed related to the invasion of the foreign elite, but that is only a trigger. The fundamental problem lies with the Celestial region's own people, Small Tower explained. Why? Ling Han continued to ask. It involves a Celestial Venerable. It's best if you don't ask. Small Tower refused to answer. Related to a Celestial Venerable? That was true. If it wasn't for a Celestial Venerable surpassing the rules of heaven and earth, how could the ancient realm be split into 2? Moreover, only when a Celestial Venerable issued an order would the entire Celestial region obey. No one dared to bring people from the ancient realm into the Celestial region. But what Ling Han was curious about was, what was the meaning of this? Would a celestial venerable care about a few people ascending from the ancient realm? This involved those 3 old monsters, so Small Tower definitely wasn't willing to say it. Otherwise, if it called out these 3 people's true names or titles, a strand of their will would descend, and then things would get out of hand. Whatever, let's collect the source energy first. Ling Han advanced, and 3 days later, he obtained the 5th source power of heaven and earth, Heaven Sun Mysterious Gold. Unfortunately, he no longer needed it, so he stored it in the Black Tower. This made him a little nervous, afraid that he would draw out those 3 old monsters. From now on, even if there is more source power of heaven and earth that you do not need, you cannot put it into the Black Tower. Although I have a 90% chance of not being discovered, it would not be safe if you do it too many times, Small Tower said solemnly, stopping Ling Han from continuing to take risks. Ling Han thought about it and agreed. Each of the Empress and Hunyo could obtain a source power of heaven and earth. In any case, they could no longer use the source power of heaven and earth as a dividing soul, so having one more or one less wouldn't make too much of a difference. Ahead of us is another slaughter source. Chapter 21-22. Ling Han would never have imagined that this slaughter source was actually a blade of grass. Slaughter is only a kind of rule, and has no physical body. Back then, the slaughter source shattered, and the power of rule condensed on this small blade of grass. It has endured the number of eras without breaking, which means that this blade of grass has become a new source of heaven and earth, Small Tower said. Ling Han looked at this blade of grass. It was no more than 3 inches tall, and only had 4 sword-shaped leaves. They were emerald green, but no matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like a strange blade of grass with slaughter source. A gust of mountain wind blew over, and the leaves trembled slightly. Instantly, it formed a flash of sword chi that sliced towards the void. A terrifying scene appeared. A gap was actually torn in the sky, and the energy storm was forcibly stopped. The gap was also shockingly huge. Ling Han was dumbfounded. This was slaughter source power, and it was filled with destructive power. Quickly collect it. The Black Dragon King set up many means nearby to weaken the resistance of the slaughter source. In less than tens of thousands of years she will succeed, Small Tower said solemnly. Ling Han nodded, and hurriedly activated the indestructible heavens scroll. But this time, the indestructible heavens scroll actually failed. This 4-leaf clover completely ignored him. What was going on? In the indestructible heavens scroll, there is no slaughter rule integrated, Small Tower explained. Come, you have to think of a way yourself. Ling Han was somewhat disappointed, but a strong impulse rose up in him. If he could collect the slaughter source with his own ability, this would be an absolute affirmation of himself. Probably no one could collect the heaven and earth source by dividing their soul. And even if they could, it should be done with the help of their elders. Ling Han opened his spirit and tried to communicate with this 4-leaf clover. The biggest difference between him and the Black Dragon King was that the latter cultivated a foreign technique, and in essence, did not belong to this world. Thus, the heaven and earth source would also be extremely disgusted with him, and would definitely not get close to him. Thus, the Black Dragon King could only use formations to weaken the heaven and earth source's resistance over a long period of time. Her methods were very shocking, and added with the fact that she was a 7th heaven celestial king, it was completely possible. Now that Ling Han was here, it was equivalent to paving the way for him. Yes, Ling Han's realm was inferior to the Black Dragon King's, but he was truly one of them. If you had to choose between the two, would you choose an enemy, or a distant relative that you had never met? Thus, Ling Han's previous harvesting of the few source powers of heaven and earth had been extremely smooth. Part of it was due to the indestructible heaven scroll, and part of it was actually due to the Black Dragon King. However, if the Black Dragon King knew about it, she definitely wouldn't be happy to accept the credit, and would instead go berserk. Billions of years of hard work had actually ended up benefiting a mere dividing soul realm cultivator. As a result, it was much easier for Ling Han to collect the slaughter source now. Otherwise, if his separated soul tried to come into contact with the slaughter source, it would be sliced into pieces by a single strand of sword chi. Since it was the slaughter origin, he would use his battle intent to attract it. Ling Han released his blazing battle intent. This was the kind of aura that would be unyielding in the face of any powerful enemy, even if it was the reincarnation of a ninth heaven celestial king. So what? He was filled with battle intent, and he believed that one day, he would be able to defeat his opponent. His heart was extremely excited, and his battle intent became tangible. It was like sabers, spears, swords, and fists roaring and clanging like a battle song. After a long time, the stalk of grass swayed lightly. Xiao xiao xiao. Its 4 leaves trembled, and 4 terrifying flashes of sword chi swept out. Pung pung pung. A large section of the mountain wall was instantly shaved off. Ling Han was speechless. He had personally witnessed the toughness of this valley. But with the activation of the slaughter source, the mountain wall was as if it were made of tofu. Its destructive power was too terrifying. This also made him extremely tempted. He had cultivated the regulations of slaughter, but how could it compare to the slaughter source? If he obtained it, his battle prowess would greatly increase again. Ji Wuming he had always been unconvinced. So what if Ji Wuming was the reincarnation of a ninth heaven celestial king? As long as he worked hard, he would definitely be able to bridge the gap between him and Ji Wuming. Shwa shwa shwa. The grass continued to flutter, and sword chi crisscrossed. Some even brushed past Ling Han's face. If they were just a hair's breadth away from hitting him, Ling Han was as calm as a mountain, not dodging or dodging. Fortunately, this was the case. Otherwise, if he moved recklessly, he would instead be hit by the sword chi. With the terrifying power of the slaughter source, his sea of consciousness would definitely explode with a single strike. Ling Han understood in his heart that this was the slaughter source testing him to see if he was worth following. This was a good thing. If he didn't even have the right to test it, how could he even talk about collecting it? He was neither impatient nor impatient. He only ignited his own battle intent, letting the slaughter source know that if it followed him, it would be able to fight to its heart's content. Although the slaughter source had slaughter in its name, slaughter was not its main purpose. Instead, it was to battle. To supplement in battle, to slaughter the strong. Boom! Ling Han's battle intent blazed endlessly, and was almost tangible. In terms of battle intent alone, he really didn't lose to a celestial king. This was the indomitable spirit of someone who had climbed all the way from a small world. Even if it was a celestial sovereign, so what? Ling Han didn't have the slightest bit of fear. He firmly believed that he would definitely be able to defeat them in the future. The grass fluttered more and more violently, and sword chi filled the sky, as if it would destroy the entire valley. Brat, how dare you! There was a fierce shout, and a black dragon danced over from afar. Pung pung pung, it crushed everything in its path, smashing the mountain walls into pieces. The Black Dragon King had arrived. The eternal celestial king had definitely returned to dust. But what about Xiaogu? A thread of nervousness flashed through Ling Han's heart. He had always taken care of his friends, and now, only the Black Dragon King had charged over. But Xiaogu had disappeared. This made him feel slightly uneasy, and worried for Xiaogu. But in this situation, he was actually the one who needed to be worried. The Black Dragon King had charged over. Wang, she pressed down with her claw from afar. The massive dragon claw descended from the sky, to say nothing of a single Ling Han. Even if there were thousands of him, she would still be able to kill him with a single wave of her hand. Was he going to fail at the last moment? Just at this moment, the 4-leaf clover suddenly fluttered slightly. Shwa! A brilliant flash of sword chi streaked past, meeting the dragon claw. Pooh! As the sword chi streaked past, the dragon claw was instantly sliced in two, and fell to the ground from both sides. Ling Han was overjoyed. He hadn't thought that the slaughter source would actually save him. Xiao! The 4-leaf clover suddenly uprooted from the ground. Its roots were less than an inch long, and as transparent as crystal. There was an indescribable sense of beauty about them as they shot towards Ling Han. Though it had blocked the attack of the Black Dragon King. That was because the Black Dragon King had launched this attack from an extremely far distance, and had not used his full power. Was there a need to use his full power to kill a dividing soul? But in the next attack, the Black Dragon King would definitely launch a thunderous attack, and the four-leaf clover would definitely not be able to block it. At first, it had still been hesitating about whether it should follow Ling Han, but with the Black Dragon King forcing it like this, there was no time for hesitation. It directly pounced towards Ling Han. "Brat, you dare to take the slaughter source, I will make your life a living hell," the Black Dragon King roared in fury. A high and mighty celestial king was actually threatening a dividing soul tier cultivator. This was too inconceivable, but it had actually happened now. How could Ling Han pay him any heed? He relaxed his heart and welcomed the four-leaf clover's arrival. Xiao, the four-leaf clover disappeared in a flash, disappearing from Ling Han's forehead. Chapter 21-24. Ling Han began a long period of seclusion again. Although he had already grasped the great collision of 4 source powers, making 5 source powers collide wasn't as simple as adding one. Rather, he had to make this source power interact with the other 4. There were too many aspects that he had to take into consideration. In the process of trying, Ling Han killed himself 3 more times. Thankfully, he had learned his lesson this time. Every time he used Rising from the Ashes, he would wait until this ability had recovered before continuing to try dangerous actions. He wouldn't waste any other time either. He studied the 4 source powers that he had just obtained, and his battle prowess improved further. In fact, he had a feeling that he could match Ji Wuming even, without using the great collision of source powers. This wasn't impossible, because Ji Wuming also had a powerful technique that could increase his battle prowess. Ling Han was about to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth, so if he still couldn't match Ji Wuming in terms of battle prowess, that would be too unreasonable. After all, even 9th heaven celestial kings were limited by their cultivation level. They could only use more regulations. 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years, Ling Han finally mastered the new great collision of source powers. He left the Black Tower and began to attack the void. Pung! He opened up a source shield, and then unleashed a terrifying attack. Boom! This attack was like a small pebble being thrown into a large river. The splash it made was practically insignificant. No, the power is too weak. Again. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion. 70 years later he tried again. There's some improvement, but it's still not enough. Again. The power is slightly stronger, but it's still much weaker. Again. 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 Another 3,000 years passed, and Ling Han had already forgotten about leaving the void. Instead, he focused all of his attention on the great collision of source powers. The power of this secret technique had been developed to a whole new level. The collision of the 4 source powers in the past was practically insignificant compared to the current collision. The 5 elements were perfect, and not only could it rival regulations like time and space, but it could even far surpass them. After all, these were the 5 laws of heaven and earth. Boom! As usual, Ling Han came out to bombard the void, testing the might of the collision of source essences. He did not expect that there would be such a great change this time. The void split open, and a passageway appeared. Ling Han was stunned for a moment, and the passageway disappeared in a flash. His power was too weak, and the spatial passageway he created was too unstable. It could only last for a moment. It worked. Ling Han had already returned to the Black Tower. Only now did he realize that he had successfully blasted open the void, and could return to the celestial realm. He laughed loudly, and with a leap, he once again exited the Black Tower, and delivered a powerful strike. The void split open again, revealing a passage. He rushed in without hesitation. Hong! His entire body trembled violently, and before he could recover his senses, a clear sky suddenly appeared in front of him. Pung! He fell head first from midair, and crashed heavily onto the ground. He felt as if all his internal organs and lungs had been turned upside down, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Previously, when he entered the void, he had LV Herong to protect him, but now, he had to pass through the void by himself. This feeling was really terrible. Immortal! Monster! The voices of a few children rang out by Ling Han's ears. He forced his eyes open, and saw that 4 small faces had appeared above his head, and all of them were looking at him curiously. Seeing Ling Han open his eyes, These 4 children were all given a fright, and hurriedly shrank their heads back. Ling Han struggled to get up. This kind of feeling was enough once, and he did not want to experience it again. He straightened up, and looked around. He saw that he was currently at the entrance of a small village. There was a massive bluestone road here, and in the middle was a well. It was also made of bluestone, and actually looked like bluestone with a warm luster. "Where is this?" Ling Han asked the 4 children. The 4 children shook their heads at the same time, and were very wary of him. Ling Han smiled, and took out candies from the Black Tower. With Hunyo by his side, he definitely would not lack snacks. "I'll give them to whoever tells me. This is the Great King Village," the 4 children said in unison. Ling Han laughed loudly, and distributed the candies to the 4 children. Then he asked, "Do you know which heaven realm this is?" This question was a little difficult for children, and the 4 children all shook their heads blankly. "What's the name of the nearest city?" Still shaking their heads. Forget it, he'd better find it himself. Hopefully, he had not been swept back to the Eastern Celestial Realm. This was not impossible. The void in the Celestial Realm did not correspond. It was possible that he entered from the Eastern Celestial Realm, walked for a while, and then came out, and had already reached the Western Celestial Realm. However, this kind of travel had no accuracy to speak of. Even celestial kings could not travel through the void. Ling Han calmed his boiling internal organs, and then jumped up. He slightly moved his limbs, and felt that they were filled with explosive power. More than 10,000 years had passed in the real world, and more than 10 million years had passed under the acceleration of the Black Tower. He had long since cultivated to the peak of the Ein Soul tier. So he decided to first break through to the Earth Soul tier, and then go to the Rock Palace. He entered the village, and found the village elders to inquire about the situation. The adult men had all entered the mountains to hunt, while the women were picking wild fruits in the small forest. Before dusk, there were only the elderly and children in this village. "The nearest city from here is called Great Cloud City," the old man said. "I went there when I was young. Young man. That place was really prosperous. Back then, I really had an urge not to return, but for the sake of my wife and children, I still gritted my teeth and returned." Ling Han smiled. Even if people of the Celestial Realm did not cultivate, their lifespans were extremely long. Generally, they could live for about 500 years, and this old man had lived for more than 450 years, and was truly at the end of his life. But compared to him, he was a junior among juniors. According to the real world, Ling Han had already lived for more than 10,000 years, and if time was accelerated, he was already an old monster of more than 10 million years. Being called a young man by someone who had only lived for more than 400 years, Ling Han was slightly amused. Unknowingly, he had also passed a long time. If it's Great Cloud City, after leaving the village and heading east, it will take a full 3 years to get there. The old man said again, and also patted Ling Han on the shoulder. "Young man, it's better to stay here. You look talented, and it won't be difficult to find a wife." Ling Han smiled, took out a bottle of elixir, and put it down. This was not valuable for him, but for mortals, it was extremely precious. It could wash the marrow and bones of the elderly, and from then on, it would not be difficult for them to live for another 200 years. In fact, this was not an elixir to increase lifespan, so the effect was not very good, but for mortals it was enough. "Uncle, take care." Ling Han stood up and walked out of the old man's hut. Just as he was about to start walking, he heard the earth shaking. It was not an earthquake, but caused by something stepping on the ground. He paused for a moment, and only after a while, he saw more than 10 horses galloping from afar, all the way into the village. These horses were not ordinary, and they had a trace of dragon blood. Their 4 feet were covered with dragon scales, and they looked very mighty and domineering. These horses rushed in, and their speed was not slow. 2 children were playing in the middle of the road, and they were immediately scared silly, and they were about to be hit. Chapter 21-25. Ling Han frowned. Though it was only a glance, he could clearly see that there were 17 fine horses in total, and there was a person sitting on each horse. They were all men, and there was a strong air of arrogance on their faces. There was a child standing on the road, and not only did they not stop their horses, they didn't even slow down. Ling Han instantly surged with fury. His figure flashed, and he had already appeared in front of the two children, standing proudly like a mountain. Pung 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 pung. These riders had no intention of reining in their horses at all, so they naturally charged straight over. The first fine horse crashed over first, but how could it possibly push aside Ling Han? Immediately, its front hooves fell, while its hind hooves rose up, and it flipped over. The fine horse behind couldn't stop at all, and crashed into the fine horse in front. This caused a series of collisions. In an instant, there were 7 fine horses that completely crashed into each other, and some even had their necks broken. They convulsed on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Those 7 riders naturally fell to the ground as well, but they all had cultivation, so they immediately climbed back up, though their expressions were slightly dumbfounded. What was going on? How had they been thrown off their horses? Nay, the remaining 10 riders reined in their horses, and all turned their horses around, heading towards Ling Han. One of them said, "Who are you, actually daring to block our way?" Ling Han ignored them, and merely patted the heads of the 2 children. "It's fine, don't cry, go play on the side." Those 2 children had no idea how dangerous the scene just now was, and only felt frightened. They sobbed as they ran towards the side of the road. "Brat, 7th brother is talking to you." The rider from before raised his voice. He seemed to be the leader of the 17 people. The 7 that had fallen off their horses finally came to their senses, and all of them were furious. They had an extremely urgent matter, and could not tarry at all, so they had no intention of reining in their horses, even though there were clearly children blocking their way. But they had never imagined that an elite would actually run out from the small village and knock over their fine horses. They all drew their weapons and glared at Ling Han with eyes brimming with killing intent. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back. These 17 people hadn't even reached the severing mundane tier, so he naturally wouldn't take them seriously. "7th bro, kill him," a knight shouted. The 7th brother hesitated for a moment before saying, "We have important matters to attend to. We don't need those 7 cloud-treading horses anymore. Everyone, let's squeeze together and set off immediately. Kid, consider yourself lucky. If it was any other time, I would have chopped you into hundreds of pieces." The riders spoke one after another. The 7 men who had fallen off their horses rode with the others, and were about to leave. "Wait." Ling Han stretched out his hands. "You want to leave just like that? The 2 kids were traumatized by the 2 of you just now. Aren't you going to compensate them? Fuck. Who do you think you are? I gave you a bit of face, and you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Curse one of the knights. "7th brother, this brat is simply courting death. Let's just kill him." A few of the knights were ready to make a move, and their ferocious nature erupted. "All right." 7th brother thought about it and nodded. Since Ling Han wanted to die so badly, he could only fulfill his wish. The 5 knights immediately leaped off their horses and spread out, surrounding Ling Han. Although their words were very domineering, they didn't dare underestimate Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had used his body to block the cloud-treading horses just then. This kind of strength was still quite strong. He had already lost interest, and planned to cripple the cultivation of these people, so that they wouldn't go and harm people again. Our Lu clan and Kong clan are both severing mundane clans. And because the Kong clan has an additional ancestor that has broken through to the 4th severance, they immediately gained the upper hand, and beat our Lu clan into retreat. If it's that powerful force, then it's enough to scare people to death. The Void-resisting sect. Ling Han was stunned. Imperial Void? The sect leader of the Void-resisting sect is the Void-controlling Immortal King. It's precisely that lord. The 12 knights all had fanatical looks on their faces. In the immortal realms, an immortal king represented invincibility, a supreme existence. Ling Han was surprised. What a coincidence. He actually heard news about the Imperial Void Immortal King again here. The patriarch of the Chung clan, an 8th heaven celestial king, was besieged by several celestial kings and left with injuries. As for the Chung clan, it was massacred by the Imperial Void celestial king. If it wasn't for the formation laid down by the celestial king of the Chung clan, which sent the Chung clan's ancestral land to the ancient realm, not a single tile would have been left. The large black dog had also said that there was a freak who had crippled his own cultivation level after reaching the 5th severance, when he was still in the severing mundane tier. Then he had to recultivate the severing mundane tier. When he reached the point where there was nothing left to sever, he had finally advanced into the dividing soul tier. This strange genius was the Imperial Void Immortal King. Most importantly, the Imperial Void Immortal King was related to the Heavenly Lord of Sealed Emotion. Celestial Venerable Amir Severing Mundane Clan was actually related to the Imperial Void Celestial King? Ling Han's curiosity was piqued. "Let's go to the Lu clan," he said. Chapter 21-26. To the Lu family. Why do you want to go to the Lu family? Haven't you vented your anger enough? Do you want to go to the Lu family and start a massacre? Ling Han glared at him. I asked you to lead the way, so just lead the way. What's with all this nonsense? Forget it. He made a move and lifted Brother 7, who was the leader of the group. Then, he flicked out a few bursts of energy to cripple the cultivation of the rest of the people. This was their punishment for disregarding human life. Xiao. He unleashed the laws of space, and his figure flashed once more. He'd already left the distance of 50 million kilometers behind him. He had obtained the void spirit-colored glass. This heaven and earth source could allow him to have countless incarnations in the area around him. It was like having countless mirrors with thousands of images, and he could switch between any of them. This was extremely practical in battle. With tens of thousands of clones, who would be able to capture his true body and deal a fatal blow. On the contrary, he could use any of his clones to attack, and there were almost no blind spots. With some slight modifications, it could also be used on movement techniques. True body incarnation, true body incarnation, incarnation, true body incarnation. Like this, he kept switching. Every time he switched, he could advance a great distance in almost no time at all. He was even faster than lightning. If I add the lightning law, will I be even faster? Ling Han rubbed his chin as he hurried along. The distance from here to the Great Cloud City would take an average person 3 years to arrive. But for Ling Han, it was only a matter of 2 or 3 steps. Before he could finish his thought, a towering city had already appeared in front of him. He paused and let go of her. Wah! 7th brother immediately vomited violently, feeling as if his internal organs and 6 lungs were about to burst out of his stomach. He was only in the Genesis tier, so how could his body withstand such spatial teleportation? Ling Han, however, did not feel any pity. This kind of person, who treated human life like grass, deserved it. He walked forward, and a force turned into a rope that bound the 7th brother, dragging him along the ground. Halt! When he arrived at the city gate, Ling Han was stopped by the guards. Entrance fee. 7th brother. One of the guards saw 7th brother being dragged by Ling Han, and was instantly startled. What 7th brother? Another guard walked towards 7th brother, his eyes twitching. The Lu family was a wealthy family in Great Cloud City, and so was the Kong family. These 2 families jointly controlled Great Cloud City. It was the same for collecting city fees. Each of them was in charge of 2 city gates, and this one was under the control of the Lu family. But recently, the Kong family and the Lu family had been at war, and the Kong family had obviously gained the upper hand. It seemed that not only was the Lu family going to lose, but it was also possible that the Lu family would completely withdraw from Great Cloud City. Thus, these guards belonging to the Lu clan began to think. Should they turn to the Kong clan sooner? In that case, capturing 7th brother and sending him to the Kong clan was not a big gift, but it was enough to show his stance. In any case, 7th brother was a centurion in the Lu army, but they immediately realized that something was wrong, because they felt that 7th brother seemed to be tied up by an invisible rope. When Ling Han moved, he would also move like a dead pig. He couldn't afford to offend him. They all shook their heads. Forget about taking 7th brother from Ling Han's hands. They didn't even take the city entrance fee. They respectfully sent Ling Han into the city. After being guards for so many years, they had also trained their eyesight. Some people could not be provoked. Which way? Ling Han naturally did not care, and asked seventh brother instead. That way. Seventh brother completely lost his temper, and pointed in a direction. Ling Han spread out his spatial laws, and quickly advanced. After about half an incense stick's worth of time he stopped. A town appeared in front of him. In a small world, this could be called a giant city, but in the immortal region, it was just a small town. He had arrived at the Lu clan. However, there was a large army surrounding the town, and catapults were hurling boulders in the direction of the town. Whoosh! Before the boulder could hit the town, a barrier of light appeared above the town to block the boulder. Every time the boulder hit the barrier, it would tremble, and there would be numerous runes flashing on it. Clearly, the Lu family had a defensive formation protecting them, and the Kong family was using the most primitive method to break it, exhausting the formation's energy. Ling Han only needed a glance to understand that this formation relied on human power. At this moment, there were hundreds of people pouring their origin energy into the formation. Many of them had already turned pale, and would not be able to hold on for much longer. Their eyesight couldn't move, but their divine sense was like quicksilver. Everywhere it went. Seventh brother was dumbfounded. He had just left the Lu family 3 days ago. But in the blink of an eye, he had returned. Just what kind of power did this man possess? Who is it? The Kong family discovered Ling Han from the outskirts of the town, and immediately rushed over, shouting at him. It's so lively. No need to trouble yourself to entertain me, said Ling Han with a smile, not even pausing for a moment. Entertain my ass. Someone was impatient and immediately rushed over, brandishing his blade at Ling Han. Sigh. Seventh brother let out a silent sigh, as if he had already expected this person's end. Bang! Sure enough, when the saber hit Ling Han's body, not only did it fail to cut through Ling Han's defense, but it also bounced back towards him. Moreover, the speed was extremely fast. With a puff, the back of the saber hit the man's forehead, directly smashing his head into pieces. Ling Han had no sympathy for him. If that person had been merciful and not used his full strength, he should have been able to easily resolve this rebound attack. But who asked him to not leave a way out for others? That was also his own death sentence. How dare you? There's an expert. The people of the Kong family cried out in alarm. After a moment of chaos, a person walked out with large strides. He had a square face and an imposing aura. This was a severing mundane tier cultivator. He was only at the 3rd severance, but he was born in different places, and everyone's fate was also different. Some severing mundane tiers could only become bandits and ruffians, while some were all pretentious, and had even more grandiose appearances than ascending origin tier elites. Your Excellency, the Lu family's destruction is already a foregone conclusion. Why do you need to get involved in this mess? He said calmly. His tone was calm, and the death of a Genesis tier naturally could not move him. The other had to be a severing mundane tier elite. If he was a 4th severance, then the Lu family would have 2 such elites, and things would be difficult to handle. Ling Han broke into a smile. I already said that you don't have to entertain me, so let's just leave it at that. He waved his hand, and continued to walk forward. Hee, then let me measure your strength. That 3rd severance Grand Elder moved, grabbing at Ling Han's shoulder. If he could easily succeed, then he would kill Ling Han with his next strike. Daring to interfere in the Kong family's matters, he was tired of living. And if the other was very strong, not weaker than him, then he would persuade the other to leave. After all, being targeted by a severing mundane ancestor was a very troublesome matter. Unless he had absolute certainty of killing him, he should not easily offend him. The Kong family was a large clan with countless clansmen, and how many of them had reached the severing mundane tier? Ling Han did not seem to notice this attack at all. His feet did not stop, and he did not even turn his head back. You seek death. That 3rd severance Grand Elder's killing intent instantly blazed. His hand was already less than an inch away from the center of Ling Han's back. He had absolute confidence that he could kill Ling Han. Then go die. He did not hesitate, and his hand grabbed down. Ah! A scream of agony rang out. Chapter 21-28. Ling Han dragged seventh brother forward and said, "Oh, I'm here to seek justice." "Seek justice? My lord, may I ask how the Han clan has offended you?" Lu Huashan asked carefully. Ling Han kicked seventh brother and said, "It's not me, it's two children." He recounted how seventh brother's group had almost bumped into the children. After listening to Ling Han, the Lu clan's members all had strange expressions. Fuck, just because of such a trivial matter, you actually personally came to the Lu clan? Weren't they just two insignificant mortals? Who would care about their lives? Ling Han glanced at everyone and said indifferently, "I care." Although the Lu clan still didn't care, they didn't dare to show it on their faces. "May I ask how you want us to compensate?" Lu Huashan asked. No matter what, Ling Han had helped them resolve the threat of the Kong clan, at least for the time being. Moreover, Ling Han had the ability to destroy the Lu clan in one move, so the Lu clan naturally didn't dare to disrespect him. This was a demon king, who knew what kind of terrifying destruction he could cause when he was angry. Since you can't control your subordinates, then there's still a need for the Lu clan to exist, Ling Han said indifferently. You want to destroy my Lu clan?" Lu Huashan gasped. Ling Han shook his head. "I'll give you 1 month to dissolve the Lu clan. Otherwise, I'll dissolve it for you." "My lord, they're just two children. It's not fair that my Lu clan has to pay such a huge price for them," Lu Huashan shouted, full of unwillingness. 1 month. Ling Han didn't waste any time, and just found a house in the town to stay. He deliberately gave them 1 month's time. His goal wasn't to destroy the Lu clan, but to let the Lu clan continue to find people from the void-resisting sect. This was an opportunity for him to fight his way into the void-resisting sect. The void-resisting immortal was inextricably linked to the Sealed Emotion Palace, and it was very likely that he was Heavenly Venerable Sealed Emotion's disciple. In Ling Han's opinion, fighting his way into the void-resisting sect was not his ultimate goal. What he really wanted to understand was Heavenly Venerate Feng Qing. Ling Han guessed that the death of the Black Tower's master had something to do with the 3 great celestial venerables. Otherwise, how could Small Tower be so afraid of the 3 great celestial venerables? Then what was the truth of the matter? Why had the ancient realm been split into 2? The celestial venerable wouldn't have done something so inexplicable, right? The large black dog had once said that the 3 heavenly venerables were passively treating the tide of darkness. What was the attitude of these 3 mighty figures? There were many things that could only be known through real contact. Using the Lu family as a starting point, he would first enter the void-resisting cult before entering the Sealed Emotion Hall. "Family head, what should we do?" As soon as Ling Han left, the people of the Lu family were in an uproar. "That guy is definitely at the dividing soul tier, and his battle prowess is astonishing. That's why he was able to forcefully break the formation. Even if we are 100 times stronger, it will still be useless." Lu Huashan pressed his hands together and said unhappily, "What are you panicking for? Don't we still have a move to make?" "Xiaoshan, go personally and deliver the news to Azure Willow City," he said to an elder. He turned towards an elder. This was a 3rd Severance Grand Elder of the Lu clan, and was also the 2nd strongest elite, that was second only to him. Lu Xiaoshan pondered and said, "But if I leave, what if the Kong clan comes to invade again? Taking away a 3rd Severance Grand Elder, if the Kong clan came to attack, then the Lu clan would be in danger. No matter. As long as that malefic star is still around, the Kong clan definitely won't dare act recklessly." Lu Huashan appeared to be filled with confidence. "Family head, is that really reliable?" someone asked. Lu Huashan nodded. "With the ancestral records as proof, we are indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King. However, it is a little hard to say. Our ancestor is the 7th grandchild of the Imperial Void Celestial King, and an accident with a woman from a brothel." Everyone gave an "oh." No wonder Lu Huashan had always been unwilling to speak of their relationship with the Imperial Void Celestial King. So that was the reason. Indeed, this was really very awkward. "All right, I will immediately go make a trip." Lu Xiaoshan nodded. He made a prompt decision and rushed towards Green Willow City. With his cultivation level, if he rushed at full speed, he could arrive in about 11 or 12 days. This was also the reason why Ling Han had given a time limit of 1 month. After Lu Xiaoshan arrived, he immediately used the communication formation there to get in touch with the Imperial Void sect. At first, with his status, it was completely impossible for him to make contact, but he made his identity clear at the first instant, so that the other party would rather believe him than not, and found a powerful figure in the sect for him. Layer upon layer of notification, and then verification. In a mere 3 days, the identity of the Lu clan was confirmed. He was indeed a descendant of the Imperial Void Celestial King, but his bloodline was already boundlessly ancient. But a descendant of a Celestial King was a descendant of a Celestial King, so how could he allow others to belittle him? There is actually such an arrogant person. I would like to see for myself. When they were discussing who to send, a man in azure spoke up. He looked extremely young, but had a domineering air, as if even a Celestial King would have to prostrate before him. Yu Lavender Fenghua, the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King, was also the disciple he doted on the most. Now he was at the Earth Soul realm, an emperor among emperors. It was said that he had some of the glory of the Imperial Void Celestial King in the past. Holy Son Yulan, there's no need for you to take action, someone hastily advised. Although Yulan Fenghua's cultivation level wasn't high, she was too doted on by the Imperial Void Immortal King. Even first and second heaven immortal kings had to give her some face. He was too important. If something were to happen to him, the Imperial Void Immortal King would definitely be enraged, and no one would be able to bear the consequences. It doesn't matter. At most, he's just a heavenly soul, Yulan Fenghua said indifferently. Although he was only at the Earth Soul stage, he had even defeated a Heavenly Soul stage Tharch before. It could be said that any dividing soul stage cultivators were just ants in his eyes. Because he wasn't just the disciple of the Imperial Void Immortal King, he'd even obtained the guidance of the Heavenly Exalt Sealed Qing. An Empyrean. What kind of person was that? He stood above the heavens and the earth, so he could naturally make him so strong that even emperors could only feel despair. He didn't believe that Ling Han could match up to him. It was just that he was suddenly seized by a sudden impulse and wanted to take a trip. Once Yulan Fenghua made up his mind, apart from the Imperial Void Immortal King, no one could make him change his mind. All right, I'll let Holy Son Yulan take a trip. Yulan Fenghua set off. He had a flying artifact that had been personally strengthened by the Imperial Void Immortal King. His flying speed was astonishingly fast, and it only took him 7 days to arrive at Green Willow City from the boundless distance. He contacted Lu Xiaoshan, and then they returned to the Lu family together. After receiving the news, Lu Huashan immediately brought all the important figures of the family out to welcome Yulan Fenghua's arrival. Welcome, Lord Holy Son. The Lu family members all bowed respectfully. Although they were the descendants of the Imperial Void Immortal King, their bloodline was too distant. Furthermore, they were born from a prostitute, so they naturally didn't have any confidence. Yulan Fenghua didn't care at all. He had seen this kind of scene many times, and it was impossible for him to feel proud. He casually nodded and said, "Where's that Kuangren?" "I'll take you there," Lu Huashan hurriedly said. With Lu Huashan leading the way, the rest of the Lu family followed him, and they majestically headed towards the place where Ling Han was staying. "You actually dared to threaten the Lu family? Fuck, I'll kill you, you bastard." How is this possible? His cultivation was lower than his, but he could still make him feel as if he was facing a great enemy, and could even take one of his attacks. How could there be such a monster? "I am Yulan Fenghua," he said in a low voice, not even sparing a glance at the Lu clan members who had been implicated. There were simply too many descendants of the Imperial Void Immortal King for an existence like this whose bloodline was so distant that it was negligible, and who came from a lowly background. There was naturally no need to care too much about his life or death. Ling Han said indifferently, a hint of caution flashing in his eyes. The pressure that Yulan Fenghua gave him was not inferior to Ji Wuming's, but Yulan Fenghua was an earth soul, which was a minor tier higher than him. From this comparison, it could be seen that Yulan Fenghua was inferior to Ji Wuming. But then again, how could a reincarnated ninth heaven immortal king compare to someone like Ling Han, who was blessed by the heavens? Ling Han! Ling Han! Yulan Fenghua muttered a few times. I'll remember you. No need, no need. Ling Han hurriedly waved his hand. I don't have the habit of being remembered by men. Talkative, Yulan Fenghua's face sank. He raised his right hand and clenched it, as if there was something in his hand. His left hand began to swipe from his right hand, and a transparent sword appeared. If you can block 100 moves from me, I'll spare your life, he said. Although Ling Han had blocked his attack, he was still filled with confidence that he would definitely win. However, he didn't dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest, and he drew out his pseudo-celestial tool. Otherwise, he was not confident that he could kill Ling Han within 100 moves. I'll play with you. Ling Han was excited. He also wanted to know what level his current battle prowess had reached. Die! Yulan Fenghua pounced, and with a flash, 3 of his divided souls appeared, attacking Ling Han from 3 different directions. His main body, meanwhile, brandished his pseudo-celestial tool and slashed at Ling Han. There were only 4 of them, but they had an imposing aura that even an army of thousands couldn't compare to. Any one of them could shatter the heavens and dominate the universe. Ling Han did not use his divided souls, but instead drew out his divine demon sword and charged at Yulan Fenghua. Arrogant, Yulan Fenghua sneered. You want to fight me without using your divided souls? His 4 bodies became one, and he started to attack Ling Han. Pung pung pung. Any shockwave could cause great destruction. In less than 10 moves, the small town of the Lu clan had been completely flattened. Not only was the foundation of the town destroyed, but a deep layer of the ground had been scraped away, forming a large lake. Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua battled fiercely above the lake. Ling Han channeled all kinds of source power, but not only was he unable to suppress Yulan Fenghua, but he was also forced back, falling into a disadvantage. Strong, really strong. He had to summon his 2 divided souls to fight, or he really would not be a match for Yulan Fenghua. The 2 young prodigies both used their full strength, and each attack could make the sun dim, and even the stars lose their color. Yulan Fenghua's expression was a bit ugly. He could actually only fight to a draw with Ling Han, putting aside the fact that he had an advantage of a minor level. Even if they were of the same cultivation level, he could not accept this. In a battle of equals, he should be invincible. It's almost 300 moves, right? Ling Han said casually. Previously, Yulan Fenghua had promised to exchange 100 moves with him. Yulan Fenghua did not say anything. Right now he was truly angry. Even if he could not kill Ling Han, he would still defeat Ling Han. Otherwise, his pride would not allow him to do so. Heavenly Pillar, he roared softly, and made a pulling motion. Suddenly, a transparent crystal-like pillar descended from the sky, suppressing towards Ling Han. Ling Han discovered to his surprise that he could not move his body. Reading on the mobile phone was more refreshing. Chapter 2130. A Beautiful Romance. This was the spatial shackle. Before becoming a celestial king, the regulations of space were above the 5 elements, and the majority of people cultivated the regulations of the 5 elements. Thus, those who cultivated the regulations of space were innately stronger than others. Yulan Fenghua revealed a proud expression. This was the unique secret art of the Imperial Void Celestial King. Among the 9 disciples of the Imperial Void Celestial King, he was the only one who had grasped this secret art. Under the heavenly pillar, Ling Han's limbs would be shackled, as if he was being suppressed by the heavenly pillar. Boom! He struck out with a palm strike towards Ling Han's chest. If this palm strike landed, Ling Han would definitely be heavily injured. However, he intentionally avoided his consciousness, which could be considered as fulfilling his previous promise. As long as Ling Han could withstand 100 moves from him, he would spare Ling Han's life. Ling Han smiled calmly. Wang! The surrounding space distorted as if countless mirrors had appeared, and images of Ling Han were everywhere. You know the regulations of space, but I don't? Yulan's elegance instantly came to a screeching halt. This was because he could not tell which Ling Han was the real Ling Han. Every single one of them exuded the same aura as the real one. But how could there be so many real bodies? Thus, they were definitely all fakes. In that case, where was the real one? Great spatial laceration. He only faltered for a moment before immediately using another immortal art. The pseudo-immortal artifact in his hand shone, and a beam of light that was tens of thousands of meters long slashed out in a circle around him. Instantly, the space collapsed, and the images of Ling Han also shattered. Finally, Ling Han's real body appeared, standing in the air 300 meters away. Beside him were his two separated souls. Yulan Fenghua stood with his sword. You are indeed very strong, but you are definitely not my match. Where does your confidence come from? Ling Han asked with a smile. He didn't use the origin clash. He believed that if he used this move, even if Yulan Fenghua didn't die, she wouldn't dare to take a second move. That's because I'm just that strong, Yulan Fenghua said proudly. She pressed her left hand toward Ling Han and clang. Divine chains of regulation shot out, forming a net that sealed off all of Ling Han's paths of retreat. Ling Han also pressed down with his left hand, activating the slaughter law. Sword chi swept out, shattering the divine chains of Yulan Fenghua. He launched a counterattack, unleashing the 9 heaven-extinguishing swords. Bang 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 buzz buzz buzz, the two great geniuses clashed against each other. Immortal techniques were activated one after another, and the smell of gunpowder grew stronger. The power of the secret techniques also grew stronger. Geniuses were all proud, especially overlords of the empire like them. If their cultivation levels were similar, then they would definitely win. Yu Fenghua, on the other hand, was under even more pressure. She was a minor realm higher than Ling Han. Even if she was forced to a draw by Ling Han, she couldn't accept it. Otherwise, how could she face others in the future? He let out a long roar, and his entire body became ethereal. Spatial spikes shot out from his body, and every single one of them was a mighty attack at the peak of the Heavenly Soul stage. It was guaranteed that even a Heavenly Soul Emperor would have a headache. Ling Han wasn't willing to easily expose the secret of his powerful physique. Thus, he also unleashed the space law. Thousands of clones appeared. No matter how powerful her attacks were, it was useless if she couldn't hit him. The two geniuses continued to fight fiercely. Sometimes Ling Han suppressed Yulan Fenghua, and sometimes it was Yulan Fenghua who suppressed Ling Han. The switch between offense and defense was astonishingly fast, and no one could truly gain the upper hand. Ha 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 ha. Yulan Fenghua suddenly laughed. He stopped and said, "Our strength is similar, so there's no point in continuing. Why don't we stop here?" All right. Ling Han nodded. Everything he was doing was to fight his way into the Void Resistance Church. Naturally, he wouldn't really fight to the death with Yulan Fenghua. If he really wanted to fight, he would use the origin collision. This destructive power was enough to destroy the world, and it could even blast a hole in the void. Come, brother Ling, let's have a good chat. Yulan Fenghua pulled Ling Han's hand like a good brother. The members of the Lu family looked at each other. The fight was over? Didn't they say that they were going to kill Ling Han? Now that the Lu family had been flattened, and a large number of people had died, who should they complain to? However, Yulan Fenghua was the saint of the Void Resistance Church, while they were merely the descendants of a brothel girl. How could they compare? Furthermore, the difference in strength was like heaven and earth. Thus, it was best not to say anything, or they might be killed by Yulan Fenghua instead. Yulan Fenghua smiled boldly, but there was a hidden killing intent in his heart. He couldn't do anything to Ling Han, and he believed that Ling Han couldn't do anything to him. However, Ling Han was a minor realm weaker than him. Thus, he was definitely inferior to Ling Han in a battle of the same cultivation level. In other words, the other party was even more monstrous than him. Such a genius was definitely not worthy of his attention, and he had to be eliminated. Thus, he had to stabilize Ling Han first, and then set up a trap to eliminate Ling Han. A person more monstrous than him could not exist in this world. At least not someone like Ling Han, who had no background. He and Ling Han left the Lu family town, although it had been razed to the ground. Then, they found a restaurant, sat opposite each other, and began to chat. Yulan Fenghua was trying to get information from Ling Han. And Ling Han was also trying to get information from the other party. Yulan Fenghua wanted to know about Ling Han's background. If this fellow was related to a ninth heaven celestial king, or even a heavenly venerable, then he wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Ling Han, on the other hand, wanted to know more about the void-resisting cult. Naturally, there was nothing simpler and more direct than asking the holy son of the void-resisting cult. In addition, Ling Han also wanted to know which heaven he was in. If he asked directly, he would probably be laughed to death. You don't even know where you are? After talking for a long time, both of them obtained some information they needed. Yulan Fenghua was sure that Ling Han didn't have a powerful background, but was truly talented and had good opportunities. Ling Han also knew some things about the void-resisting cult. At least, he knew which heaven he was in. Wanhua heaven was adjacent to rock heaven. Ling Han heaved a sigh of relief. At least he hadn't been left too far. Brother Ling, are you interested in visiting the void-resisting cult? Yulan Fenghua invited Ling Han. With your talent, Brother Ling, perhaps my master will admire you and take you in as a disciple. Here it comes. Ling Han didn't believe that the other party would be so kind as to trick him into the void-resisting cult. At that time, with Yulan Fenghua's status, it would be extremely easy for her to secretly kill him. However, this was exactly what Ling Han wanted. He wanted to enter the void-resisting cult and use it as a springboard to finally enter the sealed love hall. But not now. I still have some private matters to deal with. Let's wait for a while. Ling Han said. He wanted to go to Rock Palace first. He couldn't wait any longer. Then when? Yulan Fenghua said unwillingly. Ling Han thought about it and said, let's use 100 years as the deadline. All right, then I'll wait for Brother Ling's arrival at the void-resisting cult. Yulan Fenghua wasn't someone who worried about personal gains and losses. She immediately clapped her hands. For immortals, 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Han nodded and said, farewell. Please. Yulan Fenghua stood up to send him off. Ling Han's goal for this trip had been achieved, so he naturally wouldn't stay any longer. He specially made this trip just for the void-resisting cult. You have to think carefully, Small Tower suddenly said. Chapter 2132. This was just a small skirmish. Ascending Origin Tier elites symbolically charged forward, and Immortal Palace Tier, Dividing Soul Tier, Severing Mundane Tier, and various other immortals followed closely behind. There were many of them, and this was a testament to the strength of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King Tier force. Ling Han ran with the crowd and shouted a few times. The exaggerated expression on his face made people think that he had some kind of enmity with the Rock Palace. Brother, we're just cannon fodder. There's no need for you to be so serious. Someone at the side didn't want to go over. If you put in so much effort to put on a show, how were people supposed to live? Is that so? Ling Han chuckled. My mistake, my mistake. I overdid it. That's right. As the saying goes, the bird that pokes its head gets shot. You're making such a big fuss. If those damned women from the Rock Palace get here, they might start hunting you down. Do you think that you're very strong, just because you're in the Dividing Soul realm? Ling Han's goal was actually to attract the attention of the bird woman. At that time, there had been a great many people who had welcomed Hunyo back to the celestial realm, and as long as one appeared, she would definitely be able to recognize him. Therefore, he only kept a low profile for a moment before he immediately became lively again, shouting loudly. Both sides quickly approached each other, and then a great battle broke out. This kind of battle basically took place in midair. Usually, Ascending Origin tiers would battle fiercely at the highest point, and then the Immortal Palace tier would battle a little lower, and then the Ascending Origin tier would battle a little lower. Finally, it would be the Severing Mundane tier. They were basically only a few dozen meters above the ground. The environment here was extremely stable, so even if a chaotic battle of this level broke out, it would not cause the mountain to collapse. Otherwise, this place would have long been razed to the ground. Die, you wretch! A female from the Rock Palace locked onto Ling Han. A pair of wings flapped behind her, and she quickly charged towards Ling Han. All immortals were capable of flight, and now that she had this pair of wings, her speed skyrocketed. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of Ling Han and swept out with her sword. The Kuan-Pung lineage was naturally proficient in spatial laws. Ling Han didn't want to expose himself, so he just condensed his origin energy on his fist and parried the sword. Pung, both of them were sent flying. Ling Han was naturally faking it. His figure moved, and he charged in another direction, searching for any familiar faces. With his memory, although tens of millions of years had passed, including the time in the Black Tower, the events that had happened in the small world were still vivid in his mind. As long as the person appeared, he would definitely be able to recognize him. Don't even think about leaving. Unexpectedly, the woman was still very persistent and chased after him with her sword. It was probably because Ling Han's performance was too excessive that she hated him. Ling Han laughed. Naturally, he wouldn't stop. Instead, he ran even faster. Right at this moment, a strong feeling of danger suddenly arose in his heart, and he hurriedly stopped himself before retreating madly towards the back. Sure enough, a pair of eyes locked onto him. It was an immortal palace tier elite that had descended from above to hunt weaklings like him. If Ling Han did not make a prompt decision to retreat, he would have been struck by the opponent's thunderous attack. Meanwhile, the woman from before caught up and stabbed her sword at the back of Ling Han's head. Ling Han casually parried and pretended to be locked in a stalemate with the opponent. Then, he led the battlefield and continuously moved around, continuing to search for familiar faces. Even if he did not retaliate at all, his physique was not something that woman could break. Why did she have to do this? He could not say this clearly, and could only accept the battle listlessly. As long as that immortal palace tier elite no longer paid attention to him, he would continue to find others. But the situation of that woman from the Rock Palace was becoming more and more dire. She had already been struck by the golden saber a few times, and her whole body was riddled with wounds. Her aura was also beginning to become unstable. Brother, I won't be polite. There was a ferocious glint in Ling Han's companion's eyes, and he slashed his saber at that woman's neck. He was confident that this saber strike would cut off her head, and the power of regulation would enter her body, and this enemy would die instantly. He was the one who had delivered the fatal strike, so the credit naturally belonged to him. That woman could no longer dodge, but she was also ruthless, and instead became one with her sword, speeding up and stabbing at Ling Han. What kind of brain was this? Ling Han shook his head and stretched out his right hand, grabbing her neck. He then struck out with his left hand, and pung! He blasted the golden saber that was slashing at him from behind. Brother. The woman from the Four Seas Palace stared at Ling Han in a daze, the corners of her mouth twitching slightly. How was this guy so powerful? Why had he been running all this while? It was obvious that he would be able to finish the battle in a single turn. Would he bear a grudge against him for stealing his credit? Who on earth was he? Chapter 2133. Ling Han broke into a grin. Sorry. He waved his hand again. Pung! The elite of the Four Seas Palace was sent flying by him. Like a kite with its string cut, he drew a beautiful arc in the air before finally landing on the ground. He didn't deal a heavy blow, so that person quickly crawled back to his feet, a dumbfounded expression on his face. Perverted thief, what do you want to do? The woman that he had captured exclaimed in shock. This man had wounded his companion in order to fight over her. So what kind of beastly things would he do to her? Don't worry, you look very safe. I won't do anything to you, Ling Han said casually, and began to run madly. That immortal palace tier elite of the Four Seas Palace had been watching him all this time, and now that he suddenly rebelled, he would naturally attack in fury. Sure enough, that elite was about to shake off his opponent and attack Ling Han. However, the strength of that elite from the Rock Palace was not to be underestimated. He firmly entangled the elite, making it impossible for him to escape. Humph! That elite sneered coldly. Did they think that he was helpless just like that? He freed his hand and pointed a finger at Ling Han. Celestial end finger, he said with a light humph. Xiao! A streak of light shot rapidly toward Ling Han. This was a celestial technique that was unleashed by an Immortal Palace tier elite, and it could definitely insta-kill any dividing soul tier elite. The elite of the Rock Palace that was battling him naturally couldn't save an enemy. In any case, this was an internal conflict, and what did it have to do with her? She merely accelerated her attacks, wanting to kill this powerful enemy. Wang, a streak of light shot over. This was an attack from an Immortal Palace tier elite, and even if it wasn't a full power attack, it definitely wasn't something that a dividing soul tier elite could block. This streak of light was like a ferocious wave that could destroy the world. Fuck. Ling Han raised his hand and tossed the female of the Rock Palace out, facing this attack alone. Boom! A terrifying celestial light surged over. This was definitely fatal to dividing soul tier elites, and it instantly engulfed Ling Han. The female of the Rock Palace couldn't help but be stunned. Ling Han still tossed her out in this kind of situation, and he would rather die. What kind of breadth of mind was this? Is this true love? Before she could finish her thought, she saw the celestial light recede. Ling Han stood there unscathed, but there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Not dead. She couldn't help but be astonished. That was a strike from an Immortal Palace tier elite. Yet only a trickle of blood had trickled down the corner of Ling Han's lips. What kind of terrifying defense was this? Ling Han wiped the corner of his mouth. Just then, he had actively channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and the toughness of his physique had increased significantly. Even an Immortal Palace tier elite wouldn't be able to kill him with a single strike. However, an immortal abode was an immortal abode after all, and it still made him feel uncomfortable all over, as if his internal organs were about to burst out. In his eyes, this was a matter of course. His physique was already capable of ignoring attacks from heavenly souls. Then, if he actively channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, his defenses would increase greatly in a short period of time. Wouldn't it be very normal for him to block an attack from the Immortal Palace? However, as long as they saw this scene, they would reveal an expression of shock and involuntarily stop what they were doing. This scene was too shocking. Why aren't they fighting anymore? Some people were still waving their weapons in a frenzy, but after a long while, no one attacked, causing them to scratch their heads in confusion. Even Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier elites had noticed this, especially Ascending Origin tier elites. Their divine sense was too sharp, and they had been able to control the entire battle from beginning to end. If their side was defeated, they would have to retreat as soon as possible to avoid suffering too great a loss. Interesting, an Ascending Origin tier said, and suddenly stretched out a hand, grabbing at Ling Han. This kind of elite was really frightening. He had only moved his hand, and he had already appeared out of thin air in front of Ling Han, grabbing at him. Humph! There was no need for Ling Han to dodge, and another large hand slapped over, blasting at the first large hand. Boom! A third large hand attacked, and then a fourth and a fifth. It was as if Ling Han had suddenly become a supreme treasure, and everyone wanted to capture him. Indeed, a dividing soul tier could block an attack from an Immortal Palace. This was too astonishing, and everyone would be curious. Ling Han! An incredibly clear voice rang out, and a figure suddenly shot out from the mountains. It was precisely Hunyeo. Little ancestor, behave yourself for this old one. A large hand reached out, grabbed Hunyeo, and forcibly dragged her back. But immediately afterward, this large hand reached over again, directly ignoring space, and appeared in front of Ling Han. Long Yueshi, you still haven't died? With a light snort, another large hand appeared and swept toward her. Compared to the first large hand, which was covered in goosebumps, the second large hand was much better. It was as smooth as jade and glowed with luster. There was a kind of dignity, and a kind of grace in its elegance. Pa! The two large hands clapped together, and the regulations of the great Tao instantly clashed. Endless celestial light illuminated the sky, and even the stars in the sky completely lost their color. Pa 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 pa! Everyone knelt down. Aside from Ling Han, no one was an exception. This was a kind of intrinsic suppression. It was as if they were facing heaven and earth, without the slightest bit of resistance. The Celestial King moved. A huge force shook him, and Ling Han was instantly flung into the air. The danger of death enveloped him. He had a feeling that even if he could rise from the ashes, it would be useless. This wild wave of energy would instantly crush his flames of rebirth and completely send him into a hell of death. Because this was the technique of a celestial king, an existence that stood above everything else. He hurriedly used the mysterious power of time in the Black Tower to strengthen himself, causing the flow of time in his body to increase by 10,000 times, buying him some time to preserve his life. But even so, in his eyes, the wild wave of energy that was surging over was still ridiculously fast. He hurriedly used the source power of 5 elements, forming a defensive shield in front of him, but this really only managed to block it slightly, and the shield wall immediately shattered. In front of this storm of energy, it was completely unable to withstand a single blow. However, this had finally bought him a sliver of time. Ling Han's thoughts turned completely, and Xiao, his whole person immediately disappeared, entering into the Black Tower. Boom! In the outside world, the wild wave of energy surged, wantonly pouring out, and even low-level celestial kings would be afraid. No, even if a 9th heaven celestial king came, they would also frown. Because both sides of the battle were too powerful. They were overlords among 9th heaven celestial kings. The palace mistress of the Four Seas Palace, Shang Jiwei. The Grand Elder of the Rock Palace, Long Yueshi. After a single strike, Shang Jiwei had already appeared. She was tall and slender, and wore a white imperial robe. Her beautiful hair was coiled on top of her head, and she appeared very graceful and noble. Moreover, she was also a rare beauty, only slightly inferior to the Empress and Hunyou. But coupled with her domineering aura of a 9th heaven celestial king, she was definitely not inferior to the two women. Long Yueshi, come out and die, she said coldly. Long Yueshi completely ignored her, and only said calmly, retreat. Coward. Shang Jiwei humphed. Her opponent had already avoided battle for many years, and she was also used to it. There was nothing that could be done. Her opponent had always been injured, and it was already very lucky that he had lived for so many years. If she fought with her full strength, it was extremely likely that it would be the battle that ended the battle. No, she was just about to wave her hand and retreat when her eyes suddenly became bright, and she swept her gaze over in the direction that Ling Han had disappeared in. Long Xia, I was almost fooled by you. Although you avoided battle before, you won't back down with your words. What are you trying to hide? Chapter 2134. Shang Jiwei's celestial eyes swept over, and nothing in the world could hide from her. A 9th heaven celestial king, in a sense, was the embodiment of the rules of heaven and earth, and could see through the essence of heaven and earth. Her gaze focused on one spot, and her expression suddenly became agitated. Even her hands were trembling. Shwa! It was at this moment that a large hand suddenly reached over, directly picking up that area, and then swiftly retreated into the depths of the mountains. If Shang Jiwei hadn't been so agitated that her mind had gone blank, this large hand definitely wouldn't have succeeded so easily, but now it had caught her off guard. Long Yueshi, Shang Jiwei suddenly erupted in fury, her black hair soaring into the sky. 9 seals appeared on her body, each exuding an overbearing might. She was beyond fury, as if she had fallen into the demonic path. Her figure suddenly flew out, and she chased after that large hand. However, she had only chased for 1,000 miles when she was blocked by a screen of light. Even if she was a 9th heaven celestial king, so what? She crashed into it and stumbled. He's Yuan Sheng's heir. Shang Jiwei roared angrily. Long Yueshi, return him to me. Return my ass. The old woman Long Yueshi's aged voice sounded. Shang Jiwei, you've already lost before, so why are you still persistently entangling yourself? Now, Yuan Sheng and Yi Yin have long since become Dao. What's there to not understand? I won't understand until I destroy the Rock Palace. Shang Jiwei said harshly. As long as the brand of you and that bitch doesn't disappear, I definitely won't give up. People of the Rock Palace, listen. She suddenly calmed down, her expression frighteningly cold. Whoever opens the formation for me and lets me in, I can appoint him or her as the vice palace master of the Four Seas Palace. In addition, I only want the lives of two people. One is Long Yueshi, and the other is Yi Yin. As long as the others don't resist, I can leave them to fend for themselves, or even join the Four Seas Palace. When these words were spoken, both the Four Seas Palace and the Rock Palace were in an uproar. Shang Jiwei had previously made it clear that she wanted to slaughter everyone in the Rock Palace. What surrender? What refusal? And as long as they had the two words rock in their names, they would all be killed. But now, there was a 180-degree turn, and he only wanted the lives of Long Yueshi and Hu Niao. This was practically bewitching. However, when a ninth firmament immortal monarch made a promise in public, it was as though the heavens were speaking. One meant one, and two meant two. Otherwise, he would be abandoned by the heavenly Tao and his combat strength would plummet. In other words, Shang Jiwei's promise was absolutely true. Why the only change was that she suddenly discovered Ling Han's identity. He was the successor of Yuan Sheng. What was her relationship with Yuan Sheng? For a moment, the people of the two palaces were shocked and curious. This was gossip about three ninth firmament immortal kings. Nonsense. Long Yueshi coldly said. Don't forget that this defensive array was personally arranged by Yuan Sheng. Even if millions of epochs pass, it will still exist forever, protecting my rock palace. Hehe. Shang Jiwei didn't answer. She just sneered. She had completely controlled her emotions. With a flick of her sleeves, she turned and left. In the rock palace, a solemn expression appeared on Long Yueshi's aged face. Previously, Shang Jiwei had been very patient. She wanted to slowly drain the rock heaven's Genesis Qi and destroy the foundation of the rock palace. Then, even if there was a supreme defensive array, the rock palace would become stagnant, and it would start to stink from the inside. But now that she knew Ling Han's identity, her patience instantly disappeared completely. Sigh. Why was Ling Han so coincidentally coming at this time? With a flash, Ling Han exited the Black Tower. Ling Han! Hu Niao suddenly pounced, hanging onto Ling Han like a koala. Ling Han patted the little girl's head and asked, "What about the others? Are they all fine?" Damn Ling Han. I knew that you didn't care about Niao at all. Hu Niao grumbled as she bit Ling Han's neck. The others are all fine. Long Yueshi followed up, and then shook her head. Sigh, what an ill-fated relationship. Senior, what's going on? Ling Han asked. Although he was in the Black Tower, he still heard the conversation between Shang Jiwei and Long Yueshi. It seemed that the feud between the Four Seas Palace and the Rock Palace wasn't over territory, but over love and enmity. Long Yueshi sighed a few times, and then said, "Fine. Since you could enter the Rock Palace on your own, it proves your strength, and also proves your luck. I'll tell you. In the past, Shang Jiwei, Tian Yin, and Yuan Sheng fought side by side, grew up together, and had a close relationship. Tian Yin is the previous palace master of the Rock Palace, also known as Yi Yin. It's Hu Niao." Hu Niao interrupted angrily. She had never accepted the name Yi Yin. Long Yueshi smiled and corrected herself. Hu Niao's body has the brand of martial art left by Tian Yin, so she can inherit the foundation of Tian Yin's martial art in the future. Perhaps she can even walk out of Tian Yin's limits and step into a brand new height. Heavenly Venerable. Ling Han followed up. Long Yueshi nodded. Yuan Sheng is the master that you've never met, but you cultivate the indestructible heaven scroll, and are his genuine disciple. Yuan Sheng was extremely talented, and was the strongest genius of that era. Shang Jiwei and Tian Yin both fell in love with Yuan Sheng, but Yuan Sheng chose Tian Yin in the end, causing Shang Jiwei to hold a grudge against him. Not only did she turn against Tian Yin, she even attacked him time and time again. However, Yuan Sheng cultivated to the level of heavenly venerable in the end, and no matter what tricks Shang Jiwei used, it was all in vain. However, because of their past relationship, Yuan Sheng didn't do anything to Shang Jiwei. However, following Yuan Sheng's death, Shang Jiwei became extreme again, believing that Tian Yin killed Yuan Sheng. Taking advantage of the time when Tian Yin returned injured from resisting the tide of darkness, she suddenly attacked, and finally caused Tian Yin's death. She also wanted to destroy the rock palace, but fortunately, the great formation set up by Yuan Sheng prevented her from taking a step forward. This old woman also suffered a fatal injury in the battle against the forces of darkness, but for the sake of the juniors in the palace, this old woman could only bitterly hold on. When Yi and Hunyo grow up, this old woman will be able to leave with peace of mind. So it was a love triangle, and because of love, good sisters fell out and became enemies. It was a bit melodramatic. A dignified ninth heaven celestial king actually died because of this. It was a bit unjust. Senior, how did Senior Yuan Sheng die? Ling Han asked. A heavenly venerable was above the heavenly Tao, so how could he still die? This old woman isn't very clear, but it involves 3 supreme existences, and their names cannot be mentioned. Long Yueshi said solemnly. Even a ninth heaven celestial king revealed an expression of reverence. Heavenly venerable? Could it be that heavenly venerable Feng Qing and the other 2 supreme elites had joined forces to kill heavenly venerable Yuan Sheng? But why? There was clearly the invasion of the tide of darkness, so everyone should have been united. If it was said that the 3 heavenly venerables sold out, that was even more impossible. Now there were only 3 heavenly venerables, and if they wanted to open the passage between the 2 realms and allow the foreign realms people to directly enter, it wouldn't be an extremely simple matter. Who could stop them? Ling Han discovered that although he knew more of the truth, it was practically of no help in solving the mystery. Chapter 2136. Ling Han began to break through to the Earth Soul tier. In the past 10,000 years, he had been focused on studying the source power of the 5 elements, and under the acceleration of the Black Tower, it was even longer than 10,000 years. In this process, he would naturally have an extremely deep understanding of the nature of the Tao of heaven and earth. Source power of heaven and earth was very difficult to obtain even for celestial kings, so it was naturally wondrous. The barrier of cultivation level was soon broken. This was only a minor tier, and for a genius like Ling Han, it naturally wouldn't pose any trouble. Hung long long, dark clouds began to gather in the sky, and the heavenly tribulation arrived as promised. At first, Ling Han wanted to use the heavenly tribulation to fight his way out of the 4 Seas Palace's encirclement and go to his parents, Helian Sun Shui, and the others first. With the support of the heavenly tribulation, who would dare stop him? But on second thought, he gave up on this idea. The heavenly tribulation only lasted for half a day, and they only had to follow him and attack when the heavenly tribulation was over. What could he do then? Under the baptism of the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han's physique improved to a certain extent. However, relying on the heavenly tribulation alone wasn't very useful now, and Ling Han needed to further develop the mysteries of the indestructible heaven's scroll. He endured this heavenly tribulation very easily. After half a day, he packed up and returned. However, a storm was brewing in the Rock Palace, and the core problem was him. The Rock Palace didn't accept male disciples, nor did they entertain male guests. Keeping Ling Han here was obviously unreasonable, so a 7th Heaven Elder proposed to discuss the matter of chasing Ling Han out of the Rock Palace. What? When Ling Han heard the news, he appeared incredibly shocked. At this time, some old women actually still had the mood to discuss this problem. Had they been kicked in the head by a donkey? However, his cultivation level was low, and he had no status, so no one cared about his opinion. Not many people knew that Ling Han was actually the heir of a heavenly venerable, just like how not many people knew that Sealed Love was the title of a heavenly venerable. And it was the same for Yuan Sheng. Otherwise, the heir of a heavenly venerable would still be very fierce, though the heavenly venerable Fate-born had long since passed away. In the end, it was Long Yueshi who stepped out and said that this was a special time to deal with it, suppressing all objections. From Ling Han's point of view, this was definitely not just a commotion directed at him. A group of celestial kings were discussing the fate of a dividing soul-tier cultivator behind closed doors. Even if they were trapped in the Rock Palace, they wouldn't be this bored. There was a spy in the Rock Palace. This was what Ling Han had guessed after they had been ambushed at sea. Now that something like this had suddenly happened, He absolutely did not believe that it was an accident or a coincidence. However, Ling Han couldn't do anything. Long Yueshi should have already guessed that there was a spy in the palace. If she didn't take precautions, then she wouldn't be a 9th-layer immortal king. Ling Han learned that the Kuanping Palace didn't have an 8th-layer immortal king, so below Long Yueshi were 2 7th-layer immortal kings. Long Yueshi could transform into Dao at any moment, so these 2 7th heaven celestial kings had to shoulder the responsibility of assisting, guiding, and protecting Long Yueshi. They were also influential figures in the Rock Palace. These 2 immortal kings were Elder Fuyan and Elder Three Rivers. Among them, Elder Fuyan was more radical and had great ambitions for power. Meanwhile, Elder Three Rivers was completely focused on cultivation and was the type that didn't meddle in affairs. This time, it was Elder Fuyan who had brought up the matter of chasing Ling Han out of the Rock Palace. She was a mighty 7th heaven celestial king. Didn't she feel embarrassed? There's something wrong with this old woman, Ling Han immediately concluded in his mind. However, she was of high status and authority, so how could he chase her out of office with a few words? Of course, Hunyeo would definitely listen to him, but would others listen to Hunyeo? Hung Long Long. He only heard a deafening sound in his ears. It was as if heaven and earth had collapsed. What's going on? How dare you? Long Yueshi's voice was filled with fury. Ha ha ha, Celestial King Fuyan, well done. Shang Jiwei's voice also sounded. From today onward, you will be the Vice Palace Master of our Four Seas Palace. Ling Han's heart instantly trembled. He had just said that there was something wrong with this old woman. And who would have thought that something would happen? The Great Protective Formation was opened. Battleships appeared in the sky one after another, casting a dark shadow that was like a shadow in the hearts of the people of the Rock Palace. Why has the Great Protective Formation been opened? Could it be Elder Fuyan? Nonsense, didn't you hear Shang Jiwei's words? I said, the Four Seas Palace only wants Iyun and Grand Elder, so why do we have to risk our lives? Why don't we just surrender to the Four Seas Palace? That's right. Even if we don't surrender to the Four Seas Palace, we can just leave. Why do we have to die with the Rock Palace, a rock that is destined to sink? Everyone discussed spiritedly. Some were incomparably shocked, while others urged others to surrender. When Ling Han heard this, he finally understood that the previous meeting was only a pretense. The goal was to allow those who had the intention of surrendering to communicate and reach some sort of consensus. Now, as Celestial King Fuyan opened the Great Protective Formation, the others acted as lobbyists, speeding up the destruction of the Rock Palace. Long Yueshi, today is the day you transform into the Tao. Shang Jiwei's figure appeared, standing proudly in the sky. Her beautiful figure emitted a supreme domineering aura, like a peerless empress. We can only fight. Long Yueshi also appeared, standing proudly in the sky with a purple crutch in her right hand. Although she was in a dragon-like state, the aura she emitted wasn't any weaker than Shang Jiwei's. It's still uncertain who will live and who will die. You're at the end of your rope, yet you still dare to be so stubborn. Shang Jiwei said disdainfully. Once the Celestial Sovereign Formation was opened, the Rock Palace was just a dish in her eyes. The others can live if you put down your weapons, but Tianyun's reincarnation must be taken down. And this person, she pointed in the sky, and Ling Han's image appeared. This child must not be harmed. If anyone touches a single hair of his, I will consign them to eternal damnation. Everyone was shocked. Wasn't this the person who had fled into the Rock Palace not long ago? How did he get involved with Shang Jiwei? She even said that they couldn't harm a single hair of his. Could he be her illegitimate son? Although they were shocked, the people of the Four Seas Palace had to obey. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. The members of the Four Seas Palace all shouted. If they could win without a fight, they would naturally not be willing to risk their lives in battle. After all, there were not many battle maniacs like Ling Han. The majority of people cultivated for the sake of status, power, and wealth. The people of the Rock Palace were at a loss. Should they fight or not? The protective formation had already been broken, and the Grand Elder was definitely not Shang Jiwei's match. Otherwise, They wouldn't have been on the defensive all this time. If they were destined to lose, then what was the point of fighting? The people who already had the intention to rebel immediately put down their weapons. With such a start, many people who had been hesitating also put down their weapons. Less than a tenth of the people were completely loyal to the Rock Palace. Long Yueshi couldn't help but sigh. Although she had been on guard against a traitor in the palace, she had never imagined that it would be someone like the Propping Clouds Celestial King. This was the person who was second only to her, and she had high hopes for him. After she passed away, the Rock Palace would temporarily be entrusted to her. All disciples, put down your weapons. The Rock Palace is disbanded from today onwards, she said loudly. This was a decisive action. As long as Hunyo could grow into a ninth heaven celestial king in the future, the Rock Palace would rise again. Otherwise, there was no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. Chapter 2137. She definitely didn't want Kuimping Palace to disband. She definitely didn't want Kuimping Palace to disband. But if Kuimping Palace didn't disband, without the protection of the Empyrean formation, everyone would be slaughtered by the 4C Palace. There was no other way. Their ninth-layer immortal kings were stronger. In the immortal domain, the top combat power determined the outcome of a war. It could be said that even if the 4C Palace's people died, as long as Shang Jiwei was there, they could still easily destroy Kuimping Palace. Moreover, the 4C Palace's side was currently in the majority. Therefore, the wisest course of action was to preserve their strength and wait for the day when they could stage a comeback. Grand Elder. Countless people from Kuimping Palace immediately cried out, filled with unwillingness and anger. They wanted to kill with their gazes. Unfortunately, it was meaningless. Ding ding ding. More and more people threw their weapons on the ground and chose to leave. Only a few people still clenched their weapons, determined to fight to the death. The stubborn 4C Palace's people launched a fierce attack. The battle had already come to an end. Kuimping Palace would cease to exist from today onwards. The representative faction of Kuimping Heaven had been flattened. This made everyone from 4C Palace feel like they had been injected with stimulants. From today onwards, their names would forever be recorded in history, for future generations to revere. Long Yueshi, I'll send you on your way today. Shang Jiwei also launched an attack. If they wanted to kill Tianyun's reincarnation, they had to eliminate Long Yueshi first. With Long Yueshi's death, the Rock Palace would truly disappear and become a page in history. Long Yueshi looked deeply at Shang Jiwei. Her hunched back gradually straightened, and her white hair fluttered, rapidly turning black. She was originally extremely short, but as her back straightened, she became as tall as an ordinary person. No, she was even straighter and more slender. This wasn't as simple as straightening her back. Her entire body had grown a lot taller. The mountain winds blew, causing Long Yueshi's hair to flutter. It had already turned completely black, like a cloud. Furthermore, her face no longer resembled an old woman, but a stunning beauty in the prime of her youth. Her waist was slender, her chest full, her legs long and straight, and her skin smooth like jade. Her beauty was in no way inferior to Shang Jiwei. Long Yueshi, are you finally not running away? Sneered Shang Jiwei. She was also a peerless beauty in the past, and her talent was astonishing. Naturally, she should be young forever and never grow old. However, she had suffered serious Dao injuries, so she had no choice but to spend all her energy on suppressing them. This caused her appearance to age, and she looked like an old woman. Now Long Yueshi had decided to go all out in this battle. She forcefully pushed herself to her strongest state, and her appearance returned to normal. However, this was also her last battle. Even if Shang Jiwei did not fight with her, when she exited this state, she would also decline from her peak. Her Dao injuries would act up, and she would return to heaven. Of course, Shang Jiwei wouldn't give up. She was a proud person, and she had suppressed her anger for so many years. How could she be satisfied if she didn't destroy them with her own hands? It's just a battle. Long Yueshi's heroic spirit reached the clouds, naturally giving off a domineering aura. Even ninth firmament immortal monarchs like them were just short of reaching the Empyrean realm, so they were naturally extremely powerful. However, Such a small gap couldn't be bridged no matter how hard they tried. Therefore, ninth firmament immortal monarchs were only immortal monarchs. Shang Jiwei let out a long roar, and her figure soared furiously towards Long Yueshi. 9 runes shone on her body, showing that she was the peerless empress who reigned supreme in this world. She didn't dare to attack little Long Yueshi. She took out an ancient mirror that floated behind her, shooting out rays of light. When the light landed on her body, it could raise her battle power by a level. When it landed on Long Yueshi, it could weaken her battle power. This was the Four Seas Palace's inheritance treasure, Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror, a ninth firmament immortal weapon. There was no difference in strength between immortal metals, but when it was forged into an immortal weapon, it could not be that an immortal weapon forged by a first firmament immortal king could compare to a ninth firmament immortal king. This Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was forged from the Four Seas Palace's expert's martial art will. It contained the secret arts of 3 ninth firmament immortal kings, so its power was naturally extraordinary. It could definitely be considered as a ninth firmament immortal king. In Shang Jiwei's hands, the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was completely activated. It didn't consume any of Shang Jiwei's power, and it could attack on its own. Long Yueshi snorted and opened her hand. A ray of light flew out from the mountain and flew towards her. It stopped in front of her, and upon closer inspection, it was a suit of armor. Kuanpeng armor. In the past, the Kuanpeng origin beast reached great success in its cultivation. It extracted one of its tendons, one of its bones, and one of its horns, and fused it with 7 pieces of immortal metal to forge this armor. After 3 generations of ninth firmament immortal kings continuously refined it, it naturally became a ninth firmament immortal weapon. Wang. The Kuanpeng armor automatically attached itself to Long Yueshi's body, and an ancient rune flickered, emitting boundless might. Immortal qi filled the air, blocking the Great Sun Heavenly Emperor Mirror's blazing light, no longer affecting Long Yueshi. Boom boom boom. The 2 ninth firmament immortal kings engaged in a fierce battle. The sky trembled, and the nearby stars exploded, turning into rubble that fell from the sky. The stars in the distance also couldn't escape the calamity, but they fell one by one. Groups of stars fell, and if one fell, it would create a sea. Naturally, it would be a massacre. A battle between celestial kings was like the end of the world, let alone a battle on the level of the ninth firmament. Just think back to the invasion of the dark forces in the past, and countless celestial kings had erupted in battle. In fact, the entire Kuanpeng heaven had been beaten to the point that they had left the celestial realm and entered the void. Below, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then the battle resumed. Amidst the sounds of battle, the members of the Kuanpeng palace fell one after another. They were outnumbered, and the disparity was too great. However, some people couldn't let it go. They could obviously live if they gave up resisting, but they still chose to fight to the end. Blood splattered, and the scene was tragic. Ling Han had never feared battle, but now he was at a loss. This wasn't his battle. Even if he was more inclined towards the Kuanpeng palace because of Hunyao, it was very difficult for him to suddenly raise his butcher's knife against a complete stranger. He lacked the desire to fight, and this ignited his fighting spirit. Run! Long Yueshi's voice rang out in his mind. Take Iyun and run. Run as far as you can. From today onwards, Iyun will be in your hands. Ling Han was shocked. Hunyao was still in the Black Tower, and though this celestial tool was awesome, could it really block a ninth heaven celestial king? Without the slightest bit of hesitation, he suddenly turned around and ran down the mountain. Stop! A dividing soul tier cultivator of the Four Seas Palace blocked his way. Young master, please stop for a moment. I'm sure the palace mistress has something to say to you. Shang Jiwei actually threatened that anyone who dared to touch a single hair on Ling Han would be torn to shreds. It could be seen how much importance she placed on Ling Han, so she naturally couldn't let him leave. Moreover, Tian Yun's reincarnation hadn't been found yet, and it was possible that it was in everyone's spatial god tool, so there was even less reason for them to let him leave. Scram! Ling Han shot out a punch. Pung! That person was instantly sent flying into the air, becoming a small dot. Chapter 2138. However, that person had just been sent flying when a new obstacle appeared. This time it was an immortal palace tier. An immortal palace tier cultivator against a dividing soul tier. This was an absolute suppression. There was no exception. Thus, this person stood with his hands clasped behind his back, confident that everything was under his control. Young Master Ling, right? Why are you in such a hurry to leave? The Empress cares for you so much. And perhaps you will become our young Empress in the future. Our Four Seas Palace is a top-tier force in the celestial realm, and such glory and splendor are unimaginable to others. Yet you can obtain it easily. I'm really envious. Ling Han laughed and said, scram or not. If you don't, when I become the young Empress in the future, I'll be the first to chop off your head. Do you believe me? Fuck. That immortal palace tier cultivator's face twitched involuntarily. He felt as if he had shot himself in the foot, and the confidence on his face instantly vanished. Yes, with Shang Jiwei's regard for Ling Han, even if she didn't make Ling Han the young empress, he definitely wouldn't escape being made a holy son. And he was only a mere immortal palace tier cultivator, and could barely be considered an elite in the Four Seas Palace. If Ling Han really wanted to mess with him, who would put in a good word for him, then he should let him go. But if the crime of letting Ling Han escape was placed on his head, and Shang Jiwei blamed him, would he be able to bear the consequences? He couldn't help but be in a dilemma, and was even more regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have directly knocked Ling Han unconscious. Now that the latter had spoken, he had also thrown a difficult problem in front of him. Taking advantage of this person's hesitation, Ling Han immediately moved and broke into a run. Young Master Ling, stay. This person reached out and grabbed Ling Han's shoulder. He had made up his mind. If Ling Han wanted to mess with him, that would be a matter for the future. But if he let Ling Han escape, then Shang Jiwei's punishment would be right in front of him. He could only secretly hate himself for running out and causing such a scene. He was slightly taken aback, because the space within a 3,000 zhang radius around him was distorted, as if it had turned into many mirrors, and in each mirror was a Ling Han. He knew that these were all illusions, but these illusions were too real. Regardless of appearance or aura, they were all exactly the same as the real body, causing him to be unable to tell which one was the real body. Interesting. However, do you know that the gap between our cultivation levels is far too wide? The immortal palace tier elite humphed softly as he stretched out his right hand. A symbol that resembled a ferocious tiger glowed on the back of his palm. A shockwave spread out. Pung pung pung. The distorted space shattered, and Ling Han, who was within it, also collapsed. In just a breath's time, the mirror dimension of 10,000 zhang had completely collapsed. Where's Ling Han? The immortal palace tier elite was astonished to discover that this brat had actually appeared 1,000 miles away. In fact, he was almost out of his field of vision. What's the matter? Right under his nose, Ling Han was actually able to break free and escape. He roared and his figure moved. He rapidly chased after Ling Han, and after a few leaps, he had caught up to Ling Han. He stretched out his hand again, wanting to capture Ling Han. He refused to believe that a mighty immortal palace tier elite couldn't capture a dividing soul tier. Ling Han used the same trick again. The void spirit space opened and countless mirrors appeared. There were tens of thousands of his illusions, and it was impossible to tell which one was the real body. The immortal palace tier elite laughed loudly and said, I understand. In fact, Ling Han's void spirit space was more than 3,000 meters wide, but Ling Han had deliberately limited the size and placed his real body outside of this area. Thus, the immortal palace tier elite only thought that Ling Han was also in this area. Thus, even if he shattered this space, he still wouldn't be able to do anything to Ling Han. What a brat, to be able to use secret techniques flexibly to such an extent. He was really a genius. However, he was deeply aware that he had absolutely no right to take Ling Han as a disciple. Even Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier elite valued Ling Han very much. So how could he have a share? He unleashed his celestial power, and instantly, the mirror space was shattered again, and just as he was stunned, he saw that Ling Han had once again appeared thousands of miles away. Fuck. It was pardonable that he had been deceived once, but failing twice in the same ditch was really too much. Was he an idiot? The Immortal Palace tier elite couldn't help but feel a sliver of anger. Ling Han's technique hadn't changed in the slightest, but the mirror space of 6,000 meters that he had opened now was still not his limit. Thus, he had successfully deceived him again. But could you escape? How much weaker was a Dividing Soul tier elite than an Immortal Palace tier elite? Even if you used all your techniques, so what? You still couldn't escape from the palm of my hand. His figure dashed again, and he caught up to Ling Han for the third time. He stretched out his palm, and didn't change his attack pattern. This was also a kind of pride. Ling Han smiled, and the void spirit space opened for the third time. This time, it enveloped an area of 40,000 meters. I've already seen through your tricks, the Immortal Palace tier elite said proudly. Boom! The large hand opened, and enveloped a whole space of 40,000 meters. This has reached your limit, right? The large hand pressed down, and all the mirror images instantly shattered. However, Ling Han's true body still hadn't appeared. The expression of the Immortal Palace tier elite instantly darkened, and it was as if he had been slapped heavily in the face. This was called embarrassment. Moreover, Ling Han was thousands of miles away. This brat could open up the mirror space, and the area was actually more than 40,000 meters. The Immortal Palace tier elite was really shocked. A mere Earth soul could actually control the regulations of space in such a large area? This was too unbelievable. Old Qian, you've already attacked a few times, yet you're actually still unable to capture a mere Dividing Soul tier. Someone mocked. This was a colleague of his from the Four Seas Palace, but they usually didn't have a very friendly relationship. Old Qian humphed, and his feet moved again. He once again caught up to Ling Han, and his palm struck down. Come on, I don't believe that your mirror space can have a larger attack range than mine. However, he had miscalculated. This time, Ling Han didn't use his mirror doppelganger. Instead, he merely used his mirror doppelganger to rapidly advance. Added with the explosion of regulations of lightning, his speed instantly exploded to the extent that even Immortal Palace tier elites would be moved. Xiao, he escaped by a hair's breadth before Old Qian's attack landed. This time, even those ascending origin tiers turned their eyes over and stared at Ling Han. This Dividing Soul tier was really a bit freakish. Holy Maiden and Ran is only SOSO, right? At first, I thought that Holy Maiden and Ran would definitely become the next palace master. But if this brat joined our Four Seas Palace, with his freakish talent and the palace master's high regard for him, it would be a huge blow to Holy Maiden and Ran. Now there's a good show. The members of the Four Seas Palace discussed animatedly. The battle was basically decided, and only a few people were still stubbornly resisting, so they had enough leisure and elegant conversation. Ling Han didn't continue to flee, although he had successfully escaped from Immortal Palace tier elites 4 times, and could even do it 5 or 10 times. There would ultimately come a time when his techniques would be exhausted. He hid in the Black Tower. There were hundreds of celestial kings here, and when Shang Jiwei was free, the techniques of Ninth Heaven celestial kings were even more unpredictable. Old Qian, is this all you're capable of? He laughed loudly and began to taunt. Old Qian's face was flushed red, and he felt countless eyes staring at him, making him want to find a hole to bury himself in. He moved again and grabbed at Ling Han. Chapter 2140. The Four Seas Palace had a deep heritage. If a second Firmament Immortal King was no match for it, a fifth Firmament Immortal King would immediately step forward. If a fifth Firmament Immortal King was no match for it, a seventh Firmament Immortal King would step forward. In the end, didn't they still have an overlord like a ninth Firmament Immortal King? Since you dare to meddle in my Four Seas Palace's business, I'll let you know what it means to be immensely powerful. The seventh Firmament Immortal King attacked decisively. A gigantic palm immediately descended from the sky and pressed down on Xiaogu. Xiaogu naturally followed suit. After copying his words, he similarly pressed a palm down toward the other party. He didn't even know how to dodge, and was instantly struck by the gigantic palm. Meanwhile, the seventh heaven celestial king's figure flashed, and he escaped from the range of Xiao Gu's attack. Hong Long Long. A seventh heaven celestial king made his move. This might was too domineering. Even though this was the rock palace, and every mountain rock had been tempered by the rock origin beast to become incredibly hard, a massive crater was still forcefully blasted out, and Xiao Gu also disappeared within this crater. Ha 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 ha. Immortal King Ling Yu is indeed easy to deal with. That's true. Back then, Immortal King Ling Yu was a super emperor. Now he has a chance of reaching the 8th firmament. His strength can even match some weaker 8th firmament immortal kings. You actually dare to play tricks in front of Immortal King Ling Yu? You're courting death. The people from the 4C Palace all laughed coldly. Ling Yu Immortal King's cultivation was ranked 3rd in the 4C Palace, but his strength was only inferior to Shang Jiwei. He was the 2nd strongest expert in the 4C Palace. Now that he personally acted, how many people in this world would be able to resist his suppression? However, Immortal King Ling Yu did not smile. Instead, he became serious. He gently waved his palm, and the boiling dust and mud in the deep pit were immediately swept away. A person immediately appeared in the empty pit. It couldn't be said to be a person, but rather a bone that was snow-white and sparkling. There was an incomparably ancient symbol on it that released an aura of the vicissitudes of time. Small bone. The members of the 4C's palace were all clear. When Xiao Gu had flown over, it had been a bone, and now it was still a bone. What did this signify? The other party was completely unscathed. Gasp! A 7th firmament immortal king's attack had actually failed? At the very least, he had managed to shatter the body that Xiao Gu had manifested, which proved how powerful celestial King Ling Yu was. Previously, Lu Feng Wu Heng and the others had been completely unable to achieve this. What sort of existence are you exactly? Ling Yu Immortal King asked in a low voice. The other party was just a bone. But how could there be such a powerful bone in this world? What kind of being are you exactly? Xiao Gu repeated as it formed a new body. Ling Yu Celestial King stared at Xiao Gu for a while, and then cut off all thoughts of communicating with Xiao Gu. Regardless of whether Xiao Gu was purposefully mimicking him, or only knew how to mimic him, it was obvious that he could not possibly say anything useful. So what was the point of wasting his breath? One word: do it. Ling Yu Immortal King didn't hesitate to attack Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu's expression was completely dumbfounded. Why aren't you speaking? If you're not speaking, what's the point of only fighting? He passively accepted the challenge, only parrying and not fighting back. Ling Yu Immortal King was truly tyrannical. He was a hegemon of the immortal emperors, and his combat prowess even surpassed the 7th heavenly layer, advancing into the 8th. It should be known that there was a saying that Celestial King ascended to the heavens with every step. The difference of a minor level was like the difference between heaven and earth. King tiers could be invincible among their peers. Emperor tiers could crush those who were a minor level above them. But this was completely unsuitable in the Celestial King tier. In reality, there were very few King tiers that could advance into the Celestial King tier. Only if they obtained a monumental opportunity in the future could an Emperor tier possibly become a Celestial King. And it was only a portion of it. Only Monarch tiers would definitely be able to become a Celestial King. And no matter what, they would have to be at the 4th or 5th heaven level. But speaking of challenging those of a higher cultivation level, even Monarch tiers basically could not do it. Only Super Monarchs could do it. Ling Yu Immortal King was this kind of Monarch tier. His cultivation level was at the 7th heaven, but his battle prowess had reached the 8th heaven, and even among the 8th heaven Celestial Kings, his battle prowess could be ranked in the middle. This was too powerful. To say nothing of the fact that Xiao Gu was currently muddle-headed and did not know how to fight back at all. Even if he fought back, he definitely could not possibly be a match for Ling Yu Immortal King. His strength was already comparable to the Black Dragon King. However, Xiao Gu had an astonishing advantage, and that was that his defenses were astonishingly strong. In truth, he was only a bone. As long as his bones were not damaged, he would be fine. And his bones were as hard as divine metal. Divine metal was so hard that even a ninth heaven celestial king could not break it with their strength, and could only slowly melt it with the power of regulations. Thus, if Lingyu Immortal King wanted to truly pose a threat to Xiaogu, he could only use the power of regulations to refine Xiaogu. Otherwise, it would be a waste of effort. But to achieve this was far, far too difficult. Xiaogu had terrifying attainments in the spatial regulations, and no matter how Lingyu Immortal King tried to trap him, it was useless. He could easily break free. This caused the battle to descend into a stalemate. It was clear that Lingyu Immortal King had the upper hand. Yet no matter what, he was unable to turn this advantage into victory. Because Ling Han was already a turtle in a jar, no one made any further moves against him. After all, there were people who had suffered losses before, and if they made a move against Ling Han, it would be putting them in a difficult position. In that case, they might as well just trap Ling Han here. In the sky, the four great celestial kings battled. Shang Jiwei against Long Yueshi, and Xiaogu against Lingyu Immortal King. The battles on both sides were incredibly intense. However, practically no one could witness these two battles, because these four people were far too powerful. Not only were their movement speeds astonishingly fast, but their attacks were also so. What the crowd could actually see were balls of exploding light. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days time passed by quietly. It was not strange for a battle between celestial kings to last for several years, or even several tens of thousands of years. Thus, no one was in a hurry. The Rock Palace had existed for countless epochs. So what if they spent several years, or even several tens of thousands of years to eradicate it? But after a mere 10 days, one of the battles suddenly stopped, and there was no longer any light that dazzled the heavens. Which battle was it? Shang Jiwei against Long Yueshi, or Xiaogu against Lingyu Immortal King? Only after a while the answer was revealed. A figure suddenly descended from the sky, and landed on the ground with a bang. 2 massive wings spread out from his back, and exuded a boundless might. Moreover, the skin that was revealed was covered in layers of dragon scales, and it was completely impossible to tell that this was a person's appearance. But one did not need a face to confirm that this person was Long Yueshi, because these were rock wings. Did Long Yueshi win? The people from the Four Seas Palace were stunned, while the people from the Rock Palace were overjoyed. If the Grand Elder won, the Rock Palace wouldn't have to disband. Furthermore, the Four Seas Palace, a great enemy, would be resolved. In the future, the Rock Palace would be able to restore its dominance as a Ninth Heaven faction. Bang! Another person landed on the ground, an ancient mirror spinning behind him. Shang Jiwei. Shang Jiwei, you won, but you also lost. Long Yueshi opened her mouth. The first word was very clear and melodious, but by the second word, her voice began to become old. The dragon scales on her body also began to fall off. Her black hair turned from black to gray, then from gray to white. In an instant, she once again turned into an old woman. She laughed out loud 3 times before stopping abruptly. There was no longer a trace of aura circulating in her body. Clang! A sudden clap of thunder resounded in the sky. After that, a boundless rain of blood descended. Sorrowful cries resounded, causing everyone to feel sorrow from the bottom of their hearts. Their eyes were filled with tears. When an immortal king fell, heaven and earth mourned. Chapter 2141. Long Yueshi had perished. An immortal king, an overlord of the 9 heavens. She was practically the strongest existence in the immortal domain. She had experienced countless eras and witnessed the vicissitudes of time. But in the end, she had to return to the earth. If it wasn't for her inability to let go, she would have already transformed into the Tao several eras ago. Grand Elder. The people of Kunpeng Palace began to weep. Even immortal King Fuyun revealed a hint of grief. She had joined the Four Seas Palace because she was extremely realistic, but that didn't mean that her heart had already fallen to the Four Seas Palace. Long live Palace Lord. The people of the Four Seas Palace were in an uproar. Long Yueshi's death meant that the Kunpeng Palace had finally been conquered. Shang Jiwei didn't feel proud at all. Instead, She revealed an expression of disappointment and frustration. Perhaps Long Yueshi's dying words had stabbed her heart. She had already lost several eras ago. She had lost to Tianyin, and it was a crushing defeat. Tianyin and Yuan Sheng had long since transformed into the Tao. Now that Long Yueshi was dead, how could she still laugh at the world? When the flames of revenge had subsided, what was the point of her living? After I kill Tianyin's reincarnation and deal with the matters of the palace, I will go to the door of darkness and fight with those foreign experts until the last drop of blood flows, she murmured. Quelling the tide of darkness is Yuan Sheng's greatest wish. Although I can't fulfill it for him, I will definitely do my best. Long Yueshi, although you've been my enemy your entire life, your crimes have been erased with death. Since you're also a ninth-layer immortal king, I'll send you off. She shouted and waved her hand. Boom! The indestructible Kuanpeng Mountains were torn apart, as if they were nothing more than a painting. She waved her hand again, and Long Yueshi's corpse was sent into the torn mountain range. She then clasped her hands together, and the mountain range immediately returned to its original state, as if nothing had happened. This was the power of a ninth-stage immortal king. Others could only break a few rocks after fighting for so long, but she could easily destroy them. Enough, she said again, her voice filled with dominance. Greetings, Palace Lord. Immortal King Lingyue flew down, and half knelt in front of her, appearing extremely respectful. His lowered gaze was filled with intense adoration. He had always liked Shang Jiwei, and was willing to stay in the Four Seas Palace as number 2 for 1,000 years because of this reason. However, he never dared to confess. He was afraid that if he was rejected, Shang Jiwei would chase him out of the Four Seas Palace. Xiaogu's imitation was still very principled. Though it was Lingyu Celestial King's turn to kneel, he did not follow suit. Instead, he fell into a daze at the side. So it's the old bone demon. Shang Jiwei looked at Xiaogu. It is rumored that you have already fallen a few epochs ago. And it is true. The intelligence that was born from your celestial bone has already been extinguished. And this newly born intelligence is no more than that of a 3-year-old child. Her eyes were still very sharp, and she had seen through Xiaogu's background with a single glance. So it's the old bone demon. Xiaogu imitated him with great interest. Shang Jiwei was not offended. She looked at Ling Han with a complicated expression. After a while she said, You are Yuan Sheng's disciple, so you are my disciple, my son. The moment that was said, the people from the Four Seas Palace burst into an uproar. Shang Jiwei had a total of 3 personal disciples, but she had no children. Shang Jiwei had never married in her life, so it was naturally impossible for her to have children. Then what kind of special privilege did Ling Han have? Though everyone was indignant, no one dared to say anything. They could only be envious. The Four Seas Palace had always been Shang Jiwei's word alone. This was also the special privilege of a ninth heaven celestial king. They were high and mighty, like gods in the heavens. You are Yuan Sheng's disciple. Xiaogu also imitated Shang Jiwei's expression and actions perfectly, causing Ling Han to involuntarily feel depressed. You actually want to be my father? Hand over Tianyin's reincarnation. Shang Jiwei looked at Ling Han, her eyes filled with benevolence. She truly regarded Ling Han as her own child. Jiang Tianyin. Xiaogu imitated her from the side. Ling Han pretended to be confused and asked, What Tianyin's reincarnation? Tianyin's reincarnation definitely did not leave the Rock Palace. And she is not in anyone's spatial god tool. Then there is only one possibility, and that is that she is in one refined by Yuan Sheng, Shang Jiwei said calmly. However, she deliberately avoided mentioning the Tower of 3 Realms, because she knew that the influence of this name would be too great. Xiaogu continued to imitate shamelessly. Ling Han was astonished. Shang Jiwei had only swept out with her divine sense, and everyone's spatial god tools had been swept through by her. As expected of a ninth heaven celestial king, she was too powerful. But no matter what, he could not possibly hand over Hunyo. So he said, Aunt Wei, Senior Tianyin has long since passed away, and the present Hunyo is only Hunyo. It is just that she possesses Senior Tianyin's martial art brand, but is a completely independent personality. She is only a junior of yours, so why do you have to lower yourself to her level? It was obviously a very foolish thing to feign ignorance in front of a ninth heaven celestial king. However, Ling Han was really thick-skinned and directly addressed her as Aunt Wei, causing the members of the Four Seas Palace to exclaim that he was shameless. The speed at which he took advantage of the situation was really too fast. But this address of Aunt Wei caused Shang Jui's heart to burst with joy. If she could let go of her love for Yuan Sheng, then she definitely would not have targeted the Rock Palace for so many years. As the saying went, the deeper the love, the deeper the hatred. What made her most disappointed was that she had never been acknowledged, but this address of Aunt Wei by Ling Han was equivalent to giving her a status to the heavenly venerable of Yuan Sheng. To Shang Jue, was there anything more important than this? She couldn't help but smile and said, "You really have a sweet tongue, child." "You child." Xiaogu was tireless and learned enthusiastically. However, as long as it is related to Tianyan, then no matter what, it has to be severed. Not a single trace of her can be left in this world, Shang Jue said resolutely. How could her hatred towards Tianyan be dispelled by calling him Aunt Wei? Aunt Wei, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Let's just forget about it, Ling Han advised from the side. Shang Jue's eyes burned like torches. You are only infatuated with that little girl's beauty, and you do not truly love her. I have a disciple who is as beautiful as a goddess, and is definitely not inferior to that little girl. Her personality is gentle, and her talent in martial art is superb. I will make the decision to betroth her to you, and she will be a good match for you. Hearing these words, the members of the Four Seas Palace were all dumbfounded. Shang Jue had a total of 3 disciples, but there was only one female disciple, and that had to be Holy Maiden and Ran. Indeed, Holy Maiden and Ran's talent in martial art was extraordinary, and she was almost second only to Shang Jue. Furthermore, she was also as beautiful as a goddess, and was an exquisite beauty. But if one were to say that she had a gentle personality, everyone shook their heads in unison. They would not believe it even if there were 100 of them. Holy Maiden and Ran was definitely not fated with these 3 words. This woman was incredibly proud, like a peacock that had spread its wings. Putting aside those of the same generation, she had not even taken Immortal Palace tier or Ascending Origin tier seriously. If she knew that Shang Jue was going to betroth her to Ling Han, she would probably explode in anger. Furthermore, just how much did Shang Jue dote on Ling Han? Shang Jue had always regarded Holy Maiden and Ran as her own daughter, yet now she was betrothed to someone so easily, and did not even ask about it. It was clear how biased she was, right? How envious. The members of the Four Seas Palace all looked at Ling Han, and even a great many celestial kings were no exception. Chapter 2142. Ling Han smiled and shook his head. Auntie Wei, I already have a beautiful wife. I'm satisfied, so I won't hold up others. No. Shang Jue immediately shook her head decisively. She herself did not obtain love, which caused her to develop an extreme personality. Moreover, Ling Han was the successor of the Heavenly Lord of Life-Giving, and Ran was her disciple. To her, this was the continuation of the previous generation's love, which could make up for her regrets. One resisted in every way possible, while the other forcefully insisted, haggling back and forth. Everyone was speechless. Was this really a 9th-level immortal king? Why was she acting like a matchmaker? Moreover, if Holy Maiden and Ran knew about this, she would definitely be furious. I haven't even despised you yet, but you dare not want me. Child, you're really stubborn. Shang Jue shook her head, but her eyes were full of doting. She really treated Ling Han as her own son, using this method to imagine that she and the Heavenly Lord of Life-Giving were fated to marry each other. She could not be bothered to say anything more to Ling Han. She grabbed him with one hand, and without any resistance, Ling Han was grabbed by her great divine ability and turned into a mustard seed. Return to the palace, she shouted. Instantly, everyone retreated like the tide. Shang Jue directly tore open space and hurried to the Four Seas Palace by leaping. She did not attain Dao through spatial laws, but she had stayed in the 9th level for several epochs, and had plenty of time to cultivate other heavenly Dao laws. Thus spatial movement was naturally easy for her. Almost every 9th-level immortal king was omnipotent. Thus, it was extremely difficult to suppress those at the same level and become the overlord of the 9th level. Immortal King Lingyue also tore open space and followed Shang Jiwei. He had yet to reach the 9th level, but even with his talent, breaking through to the next level would require an endless amount of time. He would be stuck at the realm barrier for hundreds of millions of years, unable to make any progress. Thus, he naturally had the leisure to cultivate other laws, and the laws of space and time were definitely the best choices. However, even if an immortal king wanted to comprehend these two laws, he would need the corresponding immortal medicine or the corresponding natural source of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if he only relied on himself, his improvement could be said to be minimal. Therefore, he was soon left behind by Shang Jiwei's shadow. His brows were slightly furrowed, as if he had something on his mind. Originally, he had planned to confess to Shang Jiwei after the destruction of the Rock Palace, because Shang Jiwei had cut off the last ties of old love. But now, Ling Han had appeared, making Shang Jiwei overflow with motherly love. This completely messed up his plan. He liked Shang Jiwei, so naturally, he couldn't allow Shang Jiwei to have another man in her heart, even if this man was just a nephew. Therefore, he regarded Ling Han as a thorn in his side. Another reason was that his disciple, Lin Xian, was also infatuated with Ran. Now that Shang Jiwei actually wanted to betroth Ran to Ling Han, Lin Xian's wish would naturally fall through. He liked this disciple of his, Lin Xian, and saw him as his own. Now that his daughter-in-law had been snatched away, he was naturally unhappy. With these two reasons added together, Ling Yu Immortal King's killing intent soared. Of course, he definitely wouldn't attack Ling Han. If he attacked, with Shang Jiwei's eyesight, she would definitely be able to see through him. At that time, even if Shang Jiwei didn't kill him because of old love, she would definitely ruthlessly expel him. If he took a step back, there would never be a result between them. However, to kill a mere soul realm cultivator, did he need to personally attack? There were plenty of experts who could kill this brat. For example, his disciple Lin Xian was already a first secret of the immortal abode. And he was also a monarch. Wasn't it a simple matter for him to suppress Ling Han? There were too many situations where one couldn't hold back during a spar and killed someone. Shang Jiwei couldn't do anything about it, right? Moreover, with Ran's arrogance, if she found out that Shang Jiwei had betrothed herself to Ling Han, she would probably be the first to jump out and attack Ling Han. Ran was also a first secret, and her combat strength was even a bit higher than Lin Xian's. There were plenty of opportunities to kill. The Four Seas Palace was very far from the Rock Palace, so even a 9th Heaven Celestial King would need 7 days to arrive. Shua, Shang Jiwei's figure flashed, and she appeared in front of a towering city. The Four Seas Palace wasn't as simple as a palace, but a large city on the sea. It floated in the sea, and was as large as a star. How could a city float in the sea? It wasn't that the city had been enchanted with some formation that gave it the ability to float, but that there was a giant turtle beneath it that was supporting it, and it continuously swam in the sea. It was unknown how many epochs had passed, but the giant turtle had always been floating on the sea like this, and it would continue to float like this forever. The Four Seas Palace ruled over this large city, and the true location of the sect was in the center of the city. There was a chain of palaces, all of which were ocean blue, and under the illumination of the sun, they sparkled like waves. Greetings, Palace Master. As Shang Jiwei walked past, everyone on the way bowed respectfully. Though almost all the elites of the sect had been mobilized to attack the Rock Palace, there were still a considerable number of attendants and necessary protective forces left behind, lest they went out to attack the Rock Palace, only to find their home destroyed by others. Arriving at the main palace, Shang Jiwei swung her hand, and Ling Han's figure immediately enlarged, returning to his original form. Tian Yun's reincarnation, she said again, but her tone wasn't very stern. Ling Han could only act shamelessly. He shook his head and said, Hu Niu is Hu Niu, and has nothing to do with Senior Tian Yun. He now had two things to rely on. The first was Shang Jiwei's love and care for him, and the second was the Black Tower showing its might and taking him far away. Small Tower was very confident that even a celestial venerable couldn't possibly intercept it. Of course, it would naturally be best if they could settle things peacefully. Shang Jiwei stared at Ling Han, her beautiful face carrying a supreme might, as if she wanted to intimidate Ling Han into submission. Unfortunately, this was what Ling Han was least afraid of. After a while, Shang Jiwei suddenly smiled and Ran is about to come out of seclusion. You two should get to know each other first. It was naturally a small matter for her to capture Ling Han, but opening the Tower of Three Realms was a different matter. Moreover, she did indeed treat Ling Han as her own junior, and was unwilling to force Ling Han to do something he was unwilling to do. Thus, she thought of a good idea. Make Ling Han fall in love with Ran, then he would naturally forget about Tian Yun's reincarnation, and obediently hand her over. Though Ling Han didn't want to get to know this Ran, since Shang Jiwei didn't mention the matter of Hunyou, he naturally wouldn't bring it up. In any case, the feelings were mutual. If he wasn't cold, how could Ran fall for him? Let it be for now. He nodded. I'll listen to Aunt Wei's arrangements. Shang Jiwei was very satisfied. The feelings of the previous generation hadn't blossomed, so she definitely had to realize it with the next generation. Go, you can move about freely in the palace or in the city. He could run about freely in the palace or in the city, but the other meaning was that he couldn't leave the city, because Tian Yun's reincarnation was still with him. Before he handed her over, Shang Jiwei would definitely not let him leave no matter what. Ling Han excused himself and exited the main palace hall. He saw a black-robed old man appear soundlessly and bowed to him. Young Master Ling, this old servant will bring you around to familiarize yourself with the city and arrange a place for you to stay. Chapter 2144. This young man's name was Lin Xian. He was the disciple of Ling Yu's celestial king, and had outstanding talent. Now, he had the cultivation of Immortal Palace Tier 1, and his battle prowess had reached Immortal Palace Tier 3. He was a mighty monarch tier. This also filled him with confidence, and he dared to pursue Ran, the daughter of heaven. When he learned that Shang Jiwei intended to betroth Ran to Ling Han, he was naturally angry and anxious. On what basis? He had pursued Ran for so many years, and everyone in the Four Seas Palace knew about it. If Ling Han snatched his love away, how could he face others in the future? Furthermore, Ran was very likely to inherit the position of palace master, which was one of the reasons why he couldn't give up. A brat who came out of nowhere actually dared to snatch his woman. He was courting death. Of course, he only dared to think of killing Ling Han. This was an extremely good person to Shang Jiwei. Otherwise, how could she marry Ran, whom she viewed as her own daughter? Thus, he didn't dare to kill Ling Han at all, but following Ran's wishes and chasing Ling Han out of the Four Seas City was naturally a win-win situation. Not only would it please Ran, but it wouldn't enrage Shang Jiwei. Chasing Ling Han away was Ran's idea, and Ran was completely disdainful of Ling Han, and when she heard Lin Xian say this, she nodded. He was merely an Earth Soul tier cultivator, and either she or Lin Xian would be able to defeat him in a few moves. Originally, you could have escaped unscathed, Lin Xian said as he strode forward. But if you insist on humiliating yourself, then you can't blame anyone else. He didn't wait for Ling Han to answer, and stretched out a hand to grab at Ling Han. Young Master Lin, please have mercy. A black figure flashed by, blocking in front of Ling Han, and allowed Lin Xian's palm to strike. When it landed on his body, Lin Xian's entire palm sank in. That was Manager Chen. Although Lin Xian's entire hand had sunk into his chest, he didn't seem to realize it at all, and his tone didn't change in the slightest. Ling Han could clearly see that Manager Chen's chest had already turned into sand. Lin Xian's palm didn't hit him at all, so it naturally couldn't cause any damage. This old man was definitely at the ascending origin tier. A ninth heaven celestial king might not be able to directly send someone to the celestial king tier. But if it was an ascending origin tier, it should not be a problem. With Shang Jiwei's great trust in Manager Chen, Even if he could only advance to the first severance or second severance, he would still forcibly advance to the ascending origin tier. Lin Xian frowned and said, Elder Chen, why are you stopping me? He had a seventh heaven celestial king behind him, so he should not have been so polite to an ascending origin tier cultivator. He could have called him directly by his name. However, Shang Jiwei was behind Manager Chen, and she trusted him deeply. This made Lin Xian have no choice but to be polite. Not to mention him, even if Immortal King Ling Yu was here, he wouldn't dare to order Manager Chen around. Administrator Chen chuckled. Young Master Ling is an honored guest of our Four Seas Palace. This old servant naturally has the duty to protect our honored guest. Please forgive me, young Master Lin. Chen Ling Han was. Elder. Lin was. Of. This is a private matter between him and me. And Ran didn't give up. Mr. Chen, please don't interfere. Young miss, please don't make things difficult for me. Manager Chen looked troubled. Of course, and Ran wouldn't attack Ling Han without Manager Chen's permission. She looked at Ling Han and said, a man has to own up to his actions. Don't you think it's embarrassing for someone to stand up for you? Ling Han scratched his head. You're an immortal palace tier. I'm just a dividing soul. How am I supposed to fight you? If you can take one move from me, I'll let you stay here, and Ran said proudly. Of course, she wasn't going easy on Ling Han. Instead, she wanted to deal a heavy blow to Ling Han. She might even kill Ling Han. Even if Shang Jiwei blamed her afterwards, she would accept it. In any case, with how much Shang Jiwei doted on her, the worst that could happen would be a torrent of abuse. But for her to accept her fate and marry Ling Han, that was absolutely impossible. One strike. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head and said, the gap between a dividing soul tier and an immortal palace tier is too large. Putting aside the fact that you're a secret monarch, even an ordinary secret monarch would be able to kill me with a single strike. This brat isn't stupid, Lin Xian thought. Unfortunately, he was too greedy. Otherwise, he would have known that An Ran wasn't someone he could match. The difference in power between an immortal palace tier and a dividing soul tier was like the difference between heaven and earth. Perhaps Ling Han would stay in the dividing soul tier for the rest of his life, but An Ran was at least a level 5 celestial king. She might even inherit Shang Jiwei's legacy and become the strongest level 9 celestial king in the immortal region. He didn't know that there were heavenly venerables above level 9 celestial kings. Only a few people knew about this secret. Even if you can't beat me, I won't kill you, An Ran said deliberately to provoke Ling Han into agreeing. Are you still a man? Ling Han pretended to be angry. Who said I'm not a man? Then take one move from me. All right. Ling Han seemed like he couldn't take the provocation and agreed immediately. Lin Xian immediately showed a look of disdain. What an idiot. He was so easily provoked. This kind of person wasn't worthy of his attention. He could easily kill him with a simple trick. Manager Chen meanwhile was astonished. From Ling Han's performance yesterday, he was clearly a calm and collected person. So how could he possibly be so easily angered? Something was wrong. However, Ling Han dragged out his words. I'm not stupid. Why would I let you hit me for no reason? Unless you can promise me that if I can take one hit from you, you will give me a few celestial herbs. A few celestial herbs? You're really asking for too much. Who do you think you are? You think a hit from me is worth a few celestial herbs? All right. And Ran agreed without hesitation. The reason why she was so straightforward was naturally because she was already determined to kill Ling Han. She wanted to kill Ling Han. So no matter how harsh his demands were, so what? Ling Han wasn't that easy to deal with. He stretched out his hand. Then let's make this bet. If you take out the wager, I'm afraid you'll go back on your word. I'll go back on my word. And Ran was furious. She was the holy maiden of the Four Seas Palace, and also the disciple that Shang Jiwei liked the most. Her words carried enormous weight. In any case, if you don't take out the celestial herbs, I won't play. Ling Han's attitude was firm. All right, and Ran finally nodded. She opened her right hand, and 3 celestial herbs appeared in her palm. 7 million years, more than 30 million years, and 250 million years. Ling Han's gaze swept over, and he couldn't help but shake his head. I say, are you trying to fool a beggar? Celestial herbs of this age can't even be considered beginner level. And Ran couldn't help but be surprised. She didn't expect Ling Han's eyes to be so sharp. With just a glance, he completely saw through the age of the 3 celestial herbs. She glanced at Ling Han again and became vigilant. Could this kid be pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? But when she thought about it again, she shook her head. No matter what, a split soul couldn't possibly be a match for Immortal Mansion, even if it could take one hit. Moreover, she was a secret emperor. Her battle prowess was at the level of a 3 secrets. No matter how heaven-defying Ling Han was, it would be useless. He would definitely be killed in one hit. She waved her hand again, and 3 new celestial herbs appeared in her hand. Chapter 2145. Ling Han finally cracked a smile. Now you finally have some sincerity. Fine, I'll take your attack. He first asked for the celestial medicine from Ran. She wouldn't give it to him, and he wouldn't start the bet, so Ran could only concede. However, Ran didn't mind. In any case, as long as Ling Han died, she could take back whatever she took out. Is that enough? Ran asked impatiently. She had never been so accommodating to someone before. Even if it was because she hadn't promised to marry him, she still had the urge to kill Ling Han. Yes, of course you can, Ling Han said with a laugh. Young Master Ling, Manager Chen said. He understood Ran very well, and she definitely wasn't playing around with Ling Han. Rather, she wouldn't hesitate to take Ling Han's life. Otherwise, she wouldn't be Ran. Thus, he had to dissuade her. And if necessary, he wouldn't hesitate to use force to take her away. Ling Han was someone that Shang Jue had specially instructed him to take good care of, so he definitely couldn't be lost. It's fine. Ling Han winked at Manager Chen. Manager Chen was astonished. In his impression, Ling Han definitely wasn't someone that would be so greedy as to risk his own life. Moreover, this wasn't a risk but rather a death wish. Why did Ling Han still agree to the battle? Could it be that he had some special method that could stand against Immortal Palace tier elites? With this hesitation, he took a step back and didn't try to stop her. Ran moved. Boom! She opened her hand, and her fingers were like mountains that enveloped Ling Han. Wang! Ling Han's figure shuddered, and the entire space of 30,000 meters twisted into multiple mirrors, and each mirror contained a figure of Ling Han. This Ran couldn't help but falter. Which one was Ling Han's real body? This move was truly beyond her expectations. Ling Han had actually grasped the spatial law, and it was so advanced. Boom! Spatial mirror after spatial mirror shattered, and Ling Han, who was inside, was naturally shattered as well. However, about 1/3 of the spatial mirror remained unscathed. As long as there was an ethereal incarnation, Ling Han's real body could be switched at will. So this attack naturally did not cause any damage to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. Thank you for your patronage. Have a safe trip. Yuanren was stunned at first, then she flew into a rage. She naturally knew that she had fallen into Ling Han's trap. This brat was really pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. He had clearly grasped the laws of space, and had a powerful life-saving ability, but he had purposely used all sorts of excuses to provoke her into taking out the immortal medicine for a bet. Too sinister, too cunning. Is this still a man? Manager Chen stroked his beard and smiled. It turned out that Ling Han had such an ability. How could he dare to make such a bet? Ran glared at Ling Han for a while and said, Take another move from me. Ha! Didn't you say I only need to take one move? Ling Han pretended to be surprised. Ran was indeed domineering, but she was similarly arrogant. When she heard Ling Han say this, she could not help but blush. With her status, she should not have attacked a dividing soul. Not only did she attack once, she actually wanted to do it a second time. This was too embarrassing. Do you dare to take another move from me? She could only continue to provoke him. Ling Han stretched out his hand and crooked his finger. Take out 3 more immortal medicines. They all need to be over 1 billion years old. Immortal medicines that were over 1 billion years old could be used by dividing souls. Of course, Those that were 10 billion years old, or 100 billion years old were definitely better. And Ran thought for a moment. Since she had seen Ling Han's move before, she definitely could not be fooled again. Alright again. She took out another 3 immortal medicines, all of which were over 1 billion years old. Only a disciple of a 9th heaven celestial king like her could have such wealth. Ling Han gladly received them, and his face was full of smiles as he said, "Come." And Ran attacked again. This time she directly used a celestial technique. A primordial aura surged, and she seemed to have become a great beast from the primordial era. With just a slight movement, she could shatter heaven and earth. After being tricked by Ling Han once, she put away all of her contempt this time, and treated Ling Han as a true opponent. Boom! She punched out. Instantly, the space shattered, and it continued to spread in all directions. In an instant, it enveloped an area of 100,000 feet, and it was still expanding. However, Ling Han did not use spatial power again. Instead, he took this attack head-on. Pung! He was instantly blasted head-on, and his body was sent flying like a cannonball. However, Ran, Manager Chun, and Lin Xian simultaneously revealed expressions of shock. Because although Ling Han had been sent flying, his body was completely unharmed. How was this possible? After taking such a terrifying blow, Ling Han should have been smashed into pieces. How could he be practically unscathed? There was indeed some blood at the corner of his mouth, but this kind of injury was completely insignificant, and he was who knew how far away from death he was. With a prng, Ling Han crashed heavily into a stone pillar. His body instantly stopped, and then he fell down again. However, his body had not yet landed on the ground when he had already steadied himself. He had taken another blow, and it was an extremely easy one at that. This was because he had actively channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and in a short period of time, his defense had been raised to a terrifying degree. He could even easily take a full power blow from a secret monarch. Meanwhile, Ran and the others continued to gape, still in a state of deep shock. Previously, although Ling Han had also taken an attack from Ran, that was a clever move, and he had not faced Ran head-on. But this time was completely different. Ling Han had taken an attack head-on, and it was Ran's full power blow at that. Awesome, awesome to the extreme. This move caused Ran to be completely speechless, and there was nothing she could say. Yet she became even more enraged. You clearly have this kind of strength, so why didn't you use it the first time? This guy was clearly trying to cheat me of my celestial medicine. She suddenly came to a realization. This guy that seemed to be slightly stupid was actually a cunning person. He had deliberately led her into a trap and cheated her of her celestial medicine twice. Had she been cheated before? Definitely not. Firstly, no one dared, and secondly, with her genius and intelligence, who would be able to cheat her? But now such a person had appeared, and not only had he cheated her, he had done it twice. And Ran was driven mad with fury, but she could not help but admire Ling Han's strength. This guy was really audacious, and indeed had nature-defying techniques. Even she had to admit that she was impressed. Good, good, good. She said good 3 times in a row. Even if she was so furious that she wanted to kill someone, she could not bring herself to attack Ling Han again. If she had to attack a dividing soul tier 3 times in a row, her pride would not allow it. She turned and left. At least, it was impossible for her to come back to deal with Ling Han in a short period of time. Meanwhile, Lin Xian stared at Ling Han for a while longer, and then left as well. He had already viewed Ling Han as a powerful enemy that he had to eliminate. This performance was too nature-defying, and if he broke through to the Immortal Palace tier, then wouldn't he be invincible? Young Master Ling, you are really good, Manager Chen said with a laugh. He even gave Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han smiled faintly. Manager Chen is too kind. I merely have thick skin and thick flesh. Manager Chen only smiled. Ling Han was brave and astute, and it was not as simple as his defense being nature-defying. Furthermore, he had even dared to trick Holy Maiden and Ran. He was definitely the first person in the Four Seas Palace to do so. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.